Chapter 391. Zhang Xiaohua had already learned a little about embedding a miniature formation into a jade pendant on the deserted island. He had also thoroughly comprehended it on the ship back on land. When he returned to Songning town, he even gave it a try. He successfully embedded a tranquil formation into a jade pendant and gave it to Ji Xiaohua's mother as a form of compensation. However, when Zhang Xiaohua embedded the array into the jade pendant in Songning town, although it was the most primary array, the qi of heaven and earth was scarce at the moment. Zhang Xiaohua could barely make ends meet by mobilizing her qi with incantations, so she pondered over using the vital stones and the vital qi in her body to barely complete the jade pendant. At that time, her vital qi was exhausted and she was so tired that her face turned pale. Now, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to embed a more advanced defensive array into the jade pendant. Zhang Xiaohua had pondered over this array many times on her way back to Pingyang City. However, there was always a sense of obscurity when she made the incantation. When it reached a certain level, it was difficult to continue, let alone embed it into the jade pendant. However, when Zhang Xiaohua made the incantation today, she felt that it was as smooth as moving clouds and flowing water, as if the previous sluggishness had disappeared. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. However, this was not the time to ponder over it carefully. She hurriedly changed the incantation in her hands and completed the complicated transformation of the entire array. Then she shouted clearly, "Go!" She put her left index finger and middle finger together and mobilized her vital qi, striking the array that had already been completed at her fingertips toward the jade pendant in front of her. In her divine sense, she saw that the array was shrinking and the vital qi in it became denser and denser. Finally, it shrunk to the size of the jade pendant. With a very clear bang, the array was actually embedded into the jade pendant. In an instant, the jade pendant flashed with a brilliance invisible to the naked eye. The extremely ordinary old jade immediately became somewhat different. Zhang Xiaohua could naturally see some clues through her divine sense, but she could not see anything with her eyes. But just when Zhang Xiaohua was feeling satisfied and wanted to be proud, she suddenly felt that the yuan qi in the jade pendant was somewhat chaotic. With a light pung sound, the jade pendant in her hand immediately turned into a pile of powder. Zhang Xiaohua frowned. She thought about it carefully for a while before relaxing slightly. She took out another jade pendant from her bosom and continued to make it. He still had a lot of such jade pendants in his money bag. They were all from the treasure house of Shizue Mountain. Zhang Xiaohua knew the use of these jade pendants, so she didn't put them all in the box. She buried them underground, so she didn't need to be too stingy. This time, the incantation was successfully completed. However, when the incantation was inserted into the jade pendant, Zhang Xiaohua's expression was serious. The movement of her left hand seemed fast, but was actually slow. Amidst the slowness, there was a strange frequency. With another bang, the incantation was successfully inserted into the jade pendant. However, this time, the jade pendant did not undergo any special changes. The only difference was that the color of the jade had become denser. Zhang Xiaohua didn't need to look carefully with her divine awareness. She had already felt that she had succeeded this time, putting the successfully made jade talisman on the Kong. Zhang Xiaohua closed her eyes and pondered. Why did the incantation go so smoothly this time? Why did the incantation suddenly disappear? After thinking for a long time, she realized that the luckiest thing during this period was that she had come into contact with the innate tactical matrix of Byron when she was born. Although she didn't deliberately comprehend it, just a simple peek had a profound impact on her cultivation of tactical matrix. Presumably, this was the only reason. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but look at the 360 tadpole-like talismans in her Naiwen palace. They were shining with a faint golden light and surrounded her essence of devotion, shining like tassels. Zhang Xiaohua's mouth showed a trace of a smile. In the future, she would be able to comprehend it. After finding out the reason, Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes and made several jade slices into jade talismans one by one. It was very correct to say that practice makes perfect. The last few talismans were all made in one try. There was no failure. Zhang Xiaohua was also very happy to see this. She made as many as 10 talismans, smoothly. Looking at the sky, Zhang Xiaohua was about to put away the jade talismans. His heart was moved again. These 10 jade talismans were only used for defense. It was more than enough. However, if she encountered a powerful person and didn't have a thunderous counterattack, she would be at a disadvantage. It was not appropriate. As the saying goes, offense is the most powerful defense. Thinking of it, she did it. After all, it was all about cultivation. Zhang Xiaohua immediately took out 10 jade slices and put an offensive tactical matrix that she had already memorized in her heart into them. Not long after, 10 jade talismans were made. Looking at the red jade talismans, Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. Was this color related to the tactical matrix? However, she had just finished learning this tactical matrix. She was not proficient in the other tactical matrices, so she couldn't test it. Putting away the 20 jade talismans, Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged and prepared to cultivate the Carefree Heart Sutra. However, when she began to cultivate, she found that her Heart Sutra cultivation method had actually made some slight progress. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. Could it be that she could cultivate this talisman? This was a good way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Waking up the next day, Zhang Xiaohua finished practicing the Big Dipper magical fist in the bamboo forest. When he returned to the courtyard, Guosufei had already woken up to prepare dinner. Looking at her mother's slightly swollen and bloodshot eyes, Zhang Xiaohua's heart ached. Mother obviously did not sleep well last night. This boy is unfilial. However, if I can't find second brother, then I will be even more unfilial. I hope Mother can understand me. When I am done, I will definitely accompany Mother and Father. Sigh, I forgot that I still have to help Mother and Father find some longevity prescriptions. According to Venerable Huolong's records, there are some pills that can extend one's life. However, although he is knowledgeable, he is not proficient in this aspect. Cultivating the immortal Tao can extend one's life. However, Mother and Father are obviously not suitable for it. I don't even know if Big Brother and sister-in-law can do it. I am just a beginner and do not know how to guide others. Let's talk about this later. Guosufei saw Zhang Xiaohua enter the courtyard and forced a smile. Xiaohua, you went out to practice martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua respectfully said, Yes, Mother. Music does not leave the mouth and fist does not leave the hands. This martial arts needs to be practiced frequently. Seeing her mother wiping her eyes and going back to work, Zhang Xiaohua picked up the bucket and said, Mother, I am going to get some water. It has been a long time since I worked for you. Guosufei said, No need. Xiaohua, you have a good rest. Let your big brother do this work. Zhang Xiaohua was not willing to comply. She took the rope and the bucket and went out. Because it was winter, the fields were filled with snow. Zhang Xiaohua returned for a few days and did not go to the fields that were still under her name. This time, she used the excuse of fetching water to take a good look. The fields were now under Zhang Xiaohua's care. Looking at the neat ridges exposed from the snow and the fine soil in the fields, Zhang Xiaohua knew that her big brother was very meticulous in farming. Sighing, Zhang Xiaohua turned and went down the hill. Although this field was very good, it was destined that it would not belong to her. The snow at the bottom of the hill was very deep. The black well was exposed. Standing next to the well, Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat hesitant. How should she deal with the well water? Based on Zhang Xiaohua's attitude 2 days ago, he had already placed a restriction on the spring water. As long as the Zhang family came to take it, no one else would be given a single drop. But now, Zhang Xiaohua's attitude had changed. The spring water was sweet and rich in the qi of heaven and earth. It was the best gift from the heavens. Since it was a gift from the heavens, it must not be used by a particular family. If he placed a restriction on it, it would only be used by himself. What was the difference between him and the bullies in Lu Town who took other people's things for their own use? What's more, the essence of heaven was the most dependent on fate. If she monopolized it, presumably it would shorten her life and break her fortune. Because of this spring water, her family had already produced Zhang Byron. It was already a blessing for the generation. Why should she be greedy? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua was relieved. She fetched the well water, carried it with her hand, and walked back to the village. How could she still think about who drank the well water and who didn't? Now that Zhang Xiaohua is benevolent and kind, he thinks of the greater good. In fact, it is precisely because of this that it makes sense. Dear officials, think about it. If Zhang Xiaohua had placed a restriction on the well, others would only see the Zhang family drawing water from the well, and they would be able to get the sweet well water, but others would not be able to. Or perhaps the Zhang family would be able to see the well, but others would not be able to. Wouldn't it be a cover-up that would attract more attention? On the contrary, it was the most appropriate to follow fate and not reveal the mountain and not reveal the water. As for whether this spring water was the key to creating a person like Zhang Byron, this was a question that no one could say for sure. After pouring the well water into the water jar, breakfast was ready. As usual, Zhang Xiaolong brought the food next door to eat with Lu Qian, while Zhang Xiaohua ate with her mother and father in the house. Although breakfast was very short, Guo Sufei's mouth did not stop for even a moment. She gave instructions here and there, gave instructions on this side and worried about that side. Hearing this, Zhang Kai frowned a little. However, Zhang Xiaohua smiled faintly and responded to each and every one of them. She did not slack off in the slightest, as if this was the most delicious side dish. But in the end, Guo Sufei was still worried. She repeatedly doubted Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts. She was afraid that she would lose this son of hers again. Zhang Xiaohua helplessly said, "Mother, you really don't have to worry. That day, didn't you already see the weight of my weapon? Think about it. With such a heavy weapon, who wouldn't be afraid if it hit them? They would have already run away. Who would dare to fight with me? Forget it, Xiaohua. Do you think I haven't heard of storytelling? If you hit people, they wouldn't dodge. Besides, what you call a weapon? It's just a stone stick." Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, "How about this, mother? I'll give you a demonstration. What do you think of my ability?" I don't think you have the level of a martial arts master. How can I let you demonstrate?" At this time, Zhang Xiaolong walked in. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I don't need to know martial arts. How about this? Let big brother tie me up." Zhang Xiaolong was shocked and said, "Mother, Xiaohua is still young. If she has done anything wrong, just say it. Why do you have to hang her up and beat her?" -3. Chapter 392. Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and said, "What are you talking about? Big brother, am I bad enough to be hung up by mother?" After Zhang Xiaohua explained, Zhang Xiaolong understood. He found a rope from the corner and tied Zhang Xiaohua's hands and feet firmly. Don't say, Zhang Xiaolong's skill was not bad. He tied Zhang Xiaohua so tightly that she couldn't move an inch. Guo Sufei at the side was distressed. She repeatedly said to be gentler and looser. After Zhang Xiaolong finished, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Mother, do you think this is tight?" Guo Sufei quickly nodded and said, "It's tight, it's tight." Guo Sufei hadn't finished nodding when she saw Zhang Xiaohua's hands and feet exert a little force. Two pung-pung sounds were heard. The ropes that Zhang Xiaolong used a lot of effort to tie Zhang Xiaohua's hands and feet broke like withered grass. Zhang Xiaohua stood up and said, "How is it?" "Mother, even if I'm caught, I can still escape." Guo Sufei was stunned. She knew that her son was strong, but she didn't expect it to be so frightening. However, she still didn't give up and said, "But if they catch you, they will definitely throw you into prison. What's the use of your broken ropes?" Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and said, "Since it's like this, mother, boy will show you my skills." Finished speaking, he led the three people into the central room. Zhang Xiaolong found a rope and tied himself up. This time, Zhang Xiaolong used a trick. He knew that this guy would definitely break if he struggled, so he didn't waste any more effort. After Big Brother finished tying, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Mother, Father, Big Brother, this place will be the bad guy's prison. Lock the door and go out. See how I escape?" Zhang Xiaolong looked at his parents. The three of them didn't understand, but they still followed Zhang Xiaohua's instructions and locked the door. They stood in the middle of the yard and stared at the window. They wanted to see how Zhang Xiaohua would escape. But even after a long time, there was still no movement from the window. Zhang Xiaolong smiled and said, "Father, Mother, Xiaohua really screwed up this time. Luckily, I didn't tie his hands and feet tightly." At this moment, a laugh came from behind them. Someone said, "Who said I screwed up? I've been standing behind you for a long time." The three of them were shocked. When they turned around, wasn't it Zhang Xiaohua who was standing there with a smile on her face? Zhang Xiaolong was shocked. He ran up to her, looking her up and down. Reaching out to touch her left and right, he said, "Are you Xiaohua? How did you come back from outside?" Then she turned her head and asked, "Mother, I don't remember having a twin brother." Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "Deity is making fun of me. When did you learn to be this humorous? I'm the Xiaohua in the room." Guosufei also didn't believe it. She pushed open the door and saw that there were only a few pieces of rope left in the room. Looking around, Zhang Xiaolong smiled and said, "It seems that Xiaohua escaped from the window in the back wall." "Ayo, that's not right. The window in the back wall was sealed well and didn't break." "Little Blossom, how did you manage to escape?" Looking at her mother and father's questions, Zhang Xiaohua said, "This is an escape technique that I learned from Misty School. It allows me to escape when others aren't paying attention. It's very useful." "Is that so?" Guosufei and the others somewhat understood. Since Zhang Xiaohua was able to escape when her hands and feet were tied up, then Guosufei really didn't have any other opinions. Even if Zhang Xiaohua couldn't beat the other party, she couldn't escape at that time. Even if she was caught, she could still escape easily. She really didn't have any reason to keep Zhang Xiaohua here. Of course, the bloody means of Jianghu were far more than this. It wasn't something that Guosufei could understand. Zhang Xiaohua used this simple earth escape technique to convince her mother. It was just to make her mother feel at ease. Seeing that her mother finally agreed, Zhang Xiaohua's face also revealed a smile. Then she took out 10 jade talismans from her bosom and said, "Mother, Father, Deity, these are some strange things that I got from a deserted island. They can protect people. Find a string and wear them on your body." Zhang Kai reached out and took one of the jade talismans. Looking left and right, he said, "Xiaohua, this jade talisman is quite valuable." Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Father, whether this jade talisman is valuable or not, you must remember not to sell it. It can save lives." "What?" Zhang Xiaolong almost cried out, saying, "This broken thing can save lives? I think it's better to sell it." Guosufei wasn't happy and said, "Look at you two old and young. How do you know about money? Listen to Xiaohua." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Mother knows me best." "This can it save lives?" Guosufei also tried to persuade. Zhang Xiaohua hung a jade talisman on her body and said with a smile, "Deity, take that hoe and hit me hard." "No, absolutely not." Before Zhang Xiaohua finished her words, Guosufei immediately objected. "Oh, then how about this, Deity? I'll put this jade talisman on the ground. You take the hoe and hit the jade talisman hard. What do you think?" "No need, Xiaohua. This jade talisman is worth at least a few silver coins. It's such a pity." Zhang Kai was not happy. He glared at Zhang Xiaolong and said, "Just this few silver coins. Do you need to go so far, Xiaolong?" "Oh, that's right, Father. I'll listen to you." Saying that, Zhang Xiaolong took a jade talisman and threw it on the ground. Then he looked for the hoe and used all his strength to hit the jade talisman. When the hoe touched the jade talisman, it was like hitting a ball of cotton and sinking. But no matter how hard he tried, there was always a gap between the hoe and the jade talisman It couldn't touch it. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaolong shouted, "Interesting, interesting. But Xiaohua, if you wear this thing on your body, people won't hit the jade talisman when they hit you, right?" "It's okay, father. As long as you wear it, it will protect your whole body if you hit it with more than a certain amount of force." "How about I put the jade talisman on Huan Huan? You can use a wooden stick to try." Sure enough, if the jade talisman was put on the four odd beasts, Zhang Xiaolong would use a wooden stick to hit Huan Huan's, but no matter how hard Zhang Xiaolong used, he couldn't hit it. Zhang Xiaolong was overjoyed. He quickly grabbed one and said, "This thing is great. With it, your sister-in-law won't be able to hurt me any more. Ha ha ha." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and gave the other 9 jade talismans to Guosufei. She said, "Mother, let's each have one. Keep the rest as a backup. This jade talisman won't work forever. It may not work after a few times." "Okay," Guosufei agreed. She carefully put it away and said, "I'll find a silk rope later. We'll all wear it." Seeing that her mother put away the jade talismans, Zhang Xiaohua took out 10 light red jade talismans from her arms. Before she could say anything, Zhang Xiaolong shouted, "Xiaohua, what are these? Are they different from the ones just now?" "Yes, big brother, you're right. The one just now is for protection. This one," Zhang Kai interrupted, "for hitting people." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Father is really smart. No wonder the 3 of us are so smart. It's all thanks to you." Guosufei smiled and said, "Don't flatter your father. Your father said so many good things to you last night. It's all thanks to your mouth." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Father is good. Mother is good. Hee hee. Please wait a moment." After saying that, Zhang Xiaohua moved a large rock from outside the yard. It was about the size of the Zhang family's dining table. Only Zhang Xiaohua had the strength to move it. If it were Zhang Xiaolong, it would take at least 5 people. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua move such a large stone, the 3 of them didn't understand. What does this have to do with hitting people? After the stone was placed in the middle of the courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Father, mother, big brother, you all stand behind me and watch how I use this jade talisman." The 3 of them didn't dare to be careless and stood behind Zhang Xiaohua. They saw Zhang Xiaohua pick up a jade talisman and throw it at the stone with all her strength. With a ka-cha sound, the jade talisman broke into pieces and a red light flashed from the jade talisman. It was a red flame, but the flame was different from the usual flames seen in the Zhang family. When the flame touched the stone, it actually burned. After a cup of tea's time, more than half of the huge stone was burned. This strange scene made the 3 of them even more stunned. Yes, this was the first time they saw a flame that could burn a stone. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and handed over the remaining few jade talismans. Zhang Xiaolong stretched out his hand, but didn't dare to take them. He asked with some fear, "Xiaohua, isn't this thing too dangerous? If we were to accidentally trip and fall onto the jade talisman while holding it, wouldn't we burn ourselves in an instant?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and casually threw another jade talisman on the stone. This time it didn't break. Zhang Xiaohua reached out and picked it up. She put it in someone's pocket and said with a smile, "This jade talisman needs to be thrown with all your strength to be effective. If you are a little bit weaker, it won't break. Moreover, if Big Brother is carrying the jade talisman just now, the 2 jade talismans will meet and perish together. Of course, there won't be any danger." "Ah, so it's like this." Only then did Zhang Xiaolong boldly reach out to take the remaining jade talismans. Looking at them carefully, he said, "Xiaohua, this is a sharp weapon, more effective than any sword or saber. Do you have any more? Give me a few more." Zhang Xiaohua heard this, and her heart was moved. Why didn't she think of it? She smiled and said, "I still have some. I will give them to you later. But, Big Brother, don't use this thing in evil ways." Zhang Xiaolong also smiled and said, "You look like Big Brother. How come Big Brother doesn't know what you think?" Zhang Xiaohua gave the remaining few jade talismans to Guosufei. Guosufei took them and said with some reluctance, "Xiaohua, when do you want to leave after giving us all these things?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at the clouds in the sky and said, Mother, as soon as possible. If possible, I will leave tomorrow. What do you think? Ai, tomorrow is the 18th of the first month. It is not even the first month. You came back on the 9th day of the first month. It has only been 9 days, and you want to leave? Hearing the word 9, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was moved. She smiled and said, Mother, I should leave tomorrow. This 9 is very auspicious. -3. Chapter 393. Ai, what new book? Ai, Guasufei sighed deeply. No matter how auspicious it is, as long as you leave, Mother will not be happy. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. Mother, don't worry, as long as there is news about second brother, I will immediately send someone to bring the news back. You just have to wait to make braised pork to reward me. Guasufei forced a smile and wiped her tears. Yes, Little Blossom was her son, and Little Tiger was her son too. They were both her flesh and blood. There was no reason to stop her from looking for her second son, just because she felt sorry for her youngest son. Seeing this, Zhang Kai changed the topic. Today, Xiaohua, stay at home. Don't go anywhere. Accompany your mother. Oh, right, child's mother. Bring the good things Xiaohua brought for Chan to see. Okay, we will go now. Guasufei agreed, and the three of them went next door. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, You guys go first. I will go back to my room. I will be there soon. Guasufei showed the 2 jade talismans to Lu Qian and explained how to use them. Lu Qian had previously received the small primeval stones from Zhang Xiaohua, so she naturally knew that this brother of hers was not ordinary. Of course, she did not doubt. She immediately found a suitable thread from the sewing tray and passed the 6 jade talismans to everyone. Byron also received one and wore it around her neck. As for the other light red jade talismans, she also took 2 and hid them close to her body. Seeing that their daughter-in-law trusted them so much, Zhang Kai and Guasufei also did as instructed. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua also rushed over, took out a dozen light red jade talismans and said, Big brother, big sister-in-law, this is all, please keep it. Lu Qian glared at Xiaohua and said, Xiaohua, don't you still need these? You keep them for yourself. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Don't mention it, big sister-in-law. I don't need these, you guys can use them, as long as you don't use them casually and only use them to protect yourself. At this time, Guasufei also took out her own jade talisman and said, Xiaohua, Mother will let you wear this. Mother, I really... Zhang Xiaohua said half of the sentence. She could not continue. With tears in her eyes, she stretched her head and let her mother wear the talisman around her neck. Seeing this, Lu Qian hurriedly put on another one and handed it to Guasufei. Zhang Xiaohua said, Mother, you should wear it too. Why don't you let father help you? Forget it, I'll do it myself. Guasufei smiled and put the jade pendant on her body. Then Zhang Xiaohua handed over a dozen jade talismans to Lu Qian. Lu Qian only took half of them. The rest were given to Guasufei. Guasufei only took half of them and returned the other half to Lu Qian. At this time, Byron on the Kong had already woken up. Yeah, sound, turning over on the Kong. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua by the Kong bed, his eyes seemed to light up. He reached out his small hands to ask for a hug. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and held Byron in his arms. Only then did the little guy stop scratching in his arms. He just looked at him and chuckled. Zhang Xiaohua once again swept with her spiritual awareness. But Byron was still the same as other children. There was no fluctuation of primordial qi. If it was not for the fact that this 8-day-old child looked like a 5-month-old child, Zhang Xiaohua really couldn't believe that this was the baby she took out from the innate array. Lu Qian next to her asked, Xiaohua, I heard from Mother that you will leave tomorrow. Byron is not 1 month old yet. Why don't you wait to eat Byron's full moon banquet? Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, Sister-in-law, I will leave in the end. Why do you care about sooner or later? Speaking of Byron's full moon banquet, I have prepared a gift in advance. After that, he took out a large piece of primordial stone from his arms and handed it to Lu Qian. This is the same stone I gave you last time, I think Byron will like it. I have nothing to give him. Just treat this as a toy for him." This piece of primordial stone was the size of an adult's fist. The primordial qi contained in it was really surging. Zhang Xiaohua had been refining qi for a long time, but the amount of primordial qi in her body was not so much. Although Lu Qian did not understand the preciousness of this primordial stone, she knew that her son's birth was related to this stone, and it was just a much smaller stone. This one must be even more precious. However, Zhang Xiaohua was her younger brother, so she did not need to be too polite. Before she could say thank you, Bai Ren's eyes lit up, and he stretched out his small hand to hug this thing that was about the size of his head. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua put the primordial stone on the Kong, and also put Bai Ren beside it. As a result, Bai Ren reached out and hugged the primordial stone and rolled around. He had long forgotten about Zhang Xiaohua. One day passed quickly, and Zhang Xiaohua's family stayed in Lu Qian's house, accompanying Bai Ren for the entire day. Lu Qian was still in confinement, so she could not leave the house. On the 17th day of the first month, the family had dinner in their central room. Mr. Lu Kai, and Li Yinfeng also came over, and it was a happy reunion dinner. The next morning, the first ray of sunlight shone into the house. Zhang Xiaohua opened his eyes, sighed softly, and pushed the door open. He did not plan to go out to the courtyard to practice the Big Dipper magical fist, and wanted to leave quietly, afraid of the heartache of separation. Unfortunately, just as he stepped out, he saw the dark red fire in the stove. His mother had already woken up. Quietly standing at the door, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes could not help but moisten. Guosufei woke up very early. When Zhang Xiaohua came out, she had already baked a large stack of pancakes. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua come in, Guosufei smiled and said, "Xiaohua, go and sleep for a while. We still have to hurry on the road today, so rest well." Zhang Xiaohua whispered, "Mother, you don't have to bake so many pancakes. I can't finish them. This is for you to eat on the road. Along the way, other people's food is not to their heart's content. I'm afraid that you won't be used to it. Mother." Zhang Xiaohua was a little choked up. "Well, if you can't sleep, wash your face and tidy up your huan. It still has to carry you on the road. Don't starve." Zhang Xiaohua responded and went. It seems that Zhang Xiaohua's idea of quietly leaving had completely failed. Not long after, Mr. Lu Kai, and Li Yinfeng also came over. After eating, a group of people sent Zhang Xiaohua out like stars surrounding the moon. Only Lu Qian and Bai Ren didn't go out of the house. Zhang Xiaohua specially went to say goodbye to her sister-in-law. Bai Ren, this boy, was still sleeping soundly. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but hug and kiss his chubby little face. There were many people in the village who woke up early. Seeing that only the third son of the Zhang family was going out again, they all stopped and carefully gave their blessings. Zhang Xiaohua was ashamed. She thought that people were too bad before. At this time, she carefully smiled and greeted the people who were familiar with her. At the entrance of the village, there was no need to mention the reluctance and attachment. This time was different from before. Although they were reluctant to part at the beginning, they knew that there was no danger to their lives. At worst, they could just pat their butts and come back. This time, they knew that the road ahead was dangerous. Although Zhang Xiaohua showed a few skills yesterday and dispelled most of the old people's doubts, how could they bear to see their son take risks? Guosufei's face was still full of tears. Although Zhang Xiaohua was sad, she was after all 18 years old. She was not like the youth of the past who only had tears in her eyes. After saying a few words to her mother, father, and the others, she floated onto the deer. She patted Huan's bald horn, and the deer lifted its legs and moved forward. After a few steps, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but look back. Everyone raised their hands. Only her mother covered her mouth with one hand and put the other hand in front of her face with difficulty, slightly waving it. Zhang Xiaohua's hand also seemed to be weighed down by tens of thousands of pounds. It was extremely difficult for her to wave it. The tears that had been in her eyes all this time finally couldn't help but flow down the corner of her eyes. Thinking that her mother would definitely be sad if she was sad, Zhang Xiaohua forced a smile. Then she resolutely turned her head and let the sparkling tears fall to the ground. Huan Huan also seemed to understand Zhang Xiaohua's intentions. With a low whistle, it flipped its 4 hooves and galloped towards Lu Town. After turning the corner at the foot of the mountain, the Guozhuang house was hidden by the mountain. The mountain could block one's vision, but it couldn't hide one's longing heart. Zhang Xiaohua had already released her divine perception long ago. From afar, she could see her grieving family members. This kind of parting was always so sad that it made one's heart turn cold. When Zhang Xiaohua neared Pingyang City, his emotions gradually calmed down. The Guozhuang house was a peaceful harbor that he would always look forward to. However, it was not the stage of his life. Zhang Xiaohua already knew that ever since he obtained the Carefree Heart Sutra and entered the cultivation of the immortal Tao, his life had become very different from that of ordinary people. Even the martial artists couldn't compare to him. Therefore, it was still the same old saying, with great power comes great responsibility. Trying to escape? That's impossible. Looking at the approaching gates of Pingyang City, Zhang Xiaohua was filled with anticipation. How were the 2 little girls, Nie Qinyu and Little Orange, doing? Although he could see what he wanted to know as long as he released his divine perception, was there any point in doing so? Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the inn. Everything looked the same as before. It was just that the new year had just passed and there were more merchants coming and going. Business seemed to be much better and the inn was bustling with activity. However, the inn staff seemed to have a strange look in their eyes. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua enter, they weren't as enthusiastic as before. It seemed like they were avoiding him. Could it be that I didn't tip them with a large sum of money the last time I came? That's why they seemed distant? Io, could it be that Nie Qinyu has run out of money and owes them money for their rooms? Zhang Xiaohua walked into the courtyard of the inn suspiciously. In the corner of the courtyard, the horse carriage was left alone. It didn't seem to have moved at all. Zhang Xiaohua left the 4 odd beasts behind and walked to Nie Qinyu's door. There was no noise from the 2 little girls inside. Zhang Xiaohua frowned even more. Walking to the tightly shut door, Zhang Xiaohua knocked lightly on the door and asked, "Is there anyone at home?" Immediately, a hoarse voice shouted from inside, "There's no one here." However, before the voice finished, it was followed by an exclamation. "Ah, Brother Rin, it can't be." When Zhang Xiaohua heard her surprised and joyful voice, cold sweat broke out on his back. I don't think he was this intimate with Miss Nya. It's only been 10 days since we last met. Yet he misses her so much? -3. Chapter 394. Although Nie Qinyu was only 12 years old, she was still a young girl. Cough, cough. She had already grown up, and her body was filled with the unique fragrance of a girl. Her movements were like a swallow returning to the forest. But this really put Zhang Xiaohua in a difficult position. Should I step aside and let her pass? Wouldn't that be letting Miss Nya eat dirt? However, if I don't step aside, won't I be taking advantage of her? Although Zhang Xiaohua did not release his divine perception, Nie Qinyu's movements still allowed Zhang Xiaohua to make sufficient movements to avoid her. However, after thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua still stood there bravely and fearlessly. He only felt a soft and delicate body in his arms, and a sweet smell entered his nose. Then, a delicate arm wrapped around Zhang Xiaohua's waist. Zhang Xiaohua swayed and almost fell to the ground. His body, which had been tempered by the heavenly thunder and refined by the qi of heaven and earth, had never received such treatment before. All of a sudden, he seemed to feel uncomfortable. Zhang Xiaohua was about to reach out and push Nie Qinyu slightly to express to her that it was inappropriate for men and women to touch each other when Nie Qinyu leaned in his arms and cried, "Brother Rin, why are you only back now? Little Orange, she has been snatched away." "Ah." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, "Is it because of my words? If I had known that I was so powerful, I wouldn't have joked with you guys. quickly tell me what happened. Don't tell me that the bullies of Pingyang City want to force Little Orange to be his second concubine? Or did the bandits outside the city want to kidnap her to be their mistress? No matter what Zhang Xiaohua said, Nie Qinyu seemed to be frightened and refused to let go. She lay in Zhang Xiaohua's arms and cried nonstop. Although Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see Nie Qinyu buried in her arms, she could imagine the scene of Nie Qinyu sobbing in the rain. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but pout. This child doesn't have parents to love her. She's so pitiful. After about 15 minutes, Nie Qinyu seemed to be tired from crying and realized her impoliteness. She quickly escaped from Zhang Xiaohua's arms and lowered her head, blushing, as if she wanted to hide her little face in front of her chest. Zhang Xiaohua found it a little funny. She coughed twice and asked, "Little you, quickly tell me what's going on with Little Orange. How did it get snatched away?" Hearing this, Nie Qinyu quickly looked up and was about to say something, but she saw that Zhang Xiaohua's chest was wet. Wasn't that her tears just now? She immediately lowered her head in fear. Zhang Xiaohua walked forward and patted her head. "Little you, sit down first and tell me slowly. I'm back, so leave this to me." Zhang Xiaohua's action of patting her head was a little reckless. He was used to being patted by his parents, eldest brother, and second brother at home, so he naturally thought it was a gesture of comfort. However, Nie Qinyu was a girl, so it was inappropriate to pat her head. Even if it was some other part of her body, it was a big taboo to pat her head without permission. Fortunately, before Nie Qinyu could dodge, her head was patted by Zhang Xiaohua's sneaky hand. Nie Qinyu looked up a little unhappily. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua's calm smile, she felt a lot more at ease. She felt that the hand patting her head was 1,000 times warmer and made her feel safe. Nie Qinyu obediently sat on the edge of the bed and recounted everything that had happened after Zhang Xiaohua left. It turned out that ever since Zhang Xiaohua left in the snow on the 6th day of the first lunar month, although Nie Qinyu and Little Orange were angry at Zhang Xiaohua's joke, the two girls felt isolated in this unfamiliar Pingyang city. Therefore, they almost never went out. They only strolled in the courtyard when the sky cleared up. If they had nothing to do, they would stay in the house and joke around. It was no different from when they were in the boudoir in the mountain villa. The only difference was that many of their conversations involved the heartless thief who left them in this inn and left alone. However, on the 15th day of the first lunar month, the sky finally cleared up. It was another day to see the lanterns. Even the lanterns in Lu Town attracted Zhang Xiaohua's attention, not to mention the grand and lively lanterns in Pingyang City. Therefore, Nie Qinyu and Little Orange finally couldn't resist the clamor outside the inn and walked out of the door for the first time. The liveliness was actually secondary. The most important thing was that in Nie Qinyu's hometown, Carefree City, there was another custom on the 15th day of the first lunar month. That was, young girls could write their wishes on paper and place it on the lotus lanterns on the river. If the god of the water favored it, it would open the girl's paper and fulfill this lucky girl's wish. In the past, Nie Qinyu didn't have any major wishes and would do them casually. Today, however, was the first time she had a major wish. Therefore, she didn't care if this custom existed in Pingyang City. She pulled Little Orange along and wanted to go shopping for lotus lanterns. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua's words made sense. Nie Qinyu was only a 12-year-old girl. Her body was still developing, and her appearance wasn't outstanding. Although Little Orange had delicate features and was a beauty, she was still a girl after all. She didn't have a threatening aura. The two of them wouldn't cause any trouble on the streets. However, man proposes, God disposes. Since Pingyang City didn't have the custom of placing lotus lanterns, they only found something they were satisfied with after walking around for a long time. Coincidentally, just as they walked out of the lantern shop, they saw a blind man setting up a stall by the street. There were a few words on the stall, seeking future and marriage. Nie Qinyu's mind was preoccupied with the idea of placing the lanterns at night and didn't notice at all. However, Little Orange saw it and couldn't move her feet. She insisted on dragging Miss to take a look at the stall and said, "Helping Miss find marriage." How could Nya Chinyu not understand Little Orange's intention? Hence, the two of them went forward to perform a divination. The blind man asked for their birth characters and gave them two divination signs. One was above average, which fulfilled Little Orange's wish. The other was below average, which ruined Nya Chinyu's good mood. Nya Chinyu pouted and tipped them a few coins. As she walked, she said, "Not allowed, not allowed. It's too unlucky." However, when it was time to place the lanterns at night, her face was still gloomy. Little Orange carefully placed the lanterns for Mississippi. She even specially said that the water god was definitely more powerful than the blind man. Only then did Nya Chinyu feel slightly relieved. However, just as they turned the corner and returned to the inn, a man in black suddenly flew down from the wall beside them. He stretched out his hand and sealed their acupoints. Before Nya Chinyu fainted, she clearly saw the man's figure. Wasn't he the blind man who performed a divination on the street earlier? When Nya Chinyu woke up, it was already the afternoon of the next day. In the room of the inn, she heard from the innkeeper that he went out to look for friends last night and happened to see the man in black committing a crime. The man in black seemed to have seen someone appear and hurriedly ran away. Only then did he leave Nya Chinyu behind and not kidnap her. At that time, Nya Chinyu was so scared that her face turned ashen. She didn't dare to take half a step out of the inn. She didn't even have the thought of reporting it to the authorities. The innkeeper always said that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. If the victim didn't report it, then what did it have to do with him? Therefore, he kept it a secret. After hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua finally understood the way the innkeeper looked at her. Of course, she was missing, but didn't dare to report it to the authorities. The innkeeper thought that she was a human trafficker. Zhang Xiaohua touched her chin and thought for a moment. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she asked, "Little you, is Little Orange's birthday on the 7th day of the 7th month?" "Ah." Nya Chinyu was shocked and said, "How did you know?" Immediately, her face turned ashen and she said, "She even told you this?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, "When did Little Orange tell me? Why didn't I know?" You know that you already know Little Orange's birthday. I didn't tell you. She didn't tell you either. Did you dream about it?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She laughed and told her what happened in Lu Town. Nya Chinyu then laughed through her tears and said, "I thought you were blind." "Blind? Haha." Zhang Xiaohua also laughed and said, "If I were blind, I wouldn't kidnap people." Then he frowned and said, "I didn't think so much that day. I just wanted the authorities to intervene in this human trafficker's matter. However, I forgot to interrogate the man in black. It was really negligent. Yes, Big Brother in. It's been almost 10 days. I wonder if Little Orange is still alive?" At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was calm. That was because, as Nya Chinyu said, it had been 10 days. If something had happened, it would have happened long ago. Moreover, the kidnapping of the little girl by the men in black in Lu Town was probably an organized and planned collective event. It should be different from the usual plucking. Little Orange's real concern should be her life and nothing else. But Big Brother in, what should we do now? I didn't dare to report it to the authorities at that time. If the authorities asked about my background, I was afraid that I would attract the attention of the bad guys again. So, I've been waiting for Big Brother to come over for the past few days. Don't you think I'm too selfish?" Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "Little Yuer is very smart. It's very right not to report it to the authorities. Didn't you hear me say that day at the place I went, the authorities couldn't wait to run away? Why would they care? The authorities in Pingyang City might be better. However, once they ask about your background, it's not wise for you to fall into their trap first, not to mention Little Orange." Then, Big Brother in, do you think I did the right thing? Zhang Xiaohua gave her a thumbs up and said, "It's more than right. You're extremely smart." Nie Qianyu's face flushed red. The grievances that she had been suppressing in her heart for the past 10 days had long disappeared. After interacting with her for a few months, Zhang Xiaohua knew that this girl had always been competitive. However, she was still young and immature. When faced with such a situation, it was difficult for her to have the best of both worlds. He laughed and said, "All right, I'm back. Leave little Orange's matter to me. Look at your haggard face. You'd better rest more." Then he looked around and said, "Little you, I'll go next door. You sleep. Big brother Rin, please add it to your collection. Please tip it. Thank you." -3. Chapter 395. Brother Rin. Nie Qianyu wanted to say something, but stopped. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while and said, "Okay, you go ahead and sleep. I'll stand at the door." With that, he got up and walked to the door. His slender figure blocked the sunlight, and his elongated shadow was cast on the brick bed. Nie Qianyu's face was a little red, and her heart was racing. She curled up on the brick bed and pulled the blanket over her body. She also covered herself with the warm shadow and felt very at ease. Not long after, she started snoring softly. When Zhang Xiaohua heard it, he tiptoed and closed the door. Then he got up and went to the room next door. The target of the men in black was little Orange, the girl who was born on the 7th day of the 7th month. Nie Qianyu was not in any danger at all. She was just frightened. "Sigh, poor child." Zhang Xiaohua sighed in his heart. First, she was chased after. Now her own girl was kidnapped. She has been in a state of fear for the past few days. I wonder how many tricks she has used. I forgot to ask her. Zhang Xiaohua returned to the small house and sat cross-legged. To be honest, he was just comforting Nie Qianyu. He did not have any confidence in himself. Pingyang City was so big. Where could he find little Orange? Moreover, she had been missing for 10 days. He did not know where she had been transferred to. But if he did not say that, what else could he say? Sitting cross-legged on the brick bed, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine senses. His divine senses were already very powerful and could cover the entire Pingyang City. However, just like what happened in Lu Town previously, even if he could cover it completely, what was the use? You can only see, but you can't know all the movements like the back of your hand. This is divine sense, after all, not a domain. If only there was a way to leave a mark on little Orange's body. Once he released his divine senses, no matter where she was, as long as she was still in Pingyang City, he would be able to sense her. How good would that be? Zhang Xiaohua's divine senses circled around Pingyang City for a long time, but did not find anything. He had no choice but to withdraw it. It was still early, so Zhang Xiaohua closed her eyes to cultivate. The content of the Way of Heaven was boundless and vast, so it couldn't be rushed. Before leaving the Guozhuang house, he had made jade talismans that gave him a lot of inspiration. Since he could make talismans and cultivate at the same time, why not? However, before creating the talismans, Zhang Xiaohua had something more important to do. She had to comprehend the 365 talismans in the Golden Formation in her Naiwen Palace. The first time Zhang Xiaohua chose a talisman, just as he immersed his spiritual consciousness into it, he was immediately exhausted, so he immediately withdrew his spiritual consciousness. So he still did not know anything about these 365 talismans. Now that he had some free time, he naturally had to continue to talk about each of the talismans and try to find a breakthrough in his cultivation. Looking at these 365 talismans that were connected together like tadpoles, Zhang Xiaohua was a little embarrassed. These tadpoles were almost exactly the same. From the outside, one could not tell the difference at all. However, Zhang Xiaohua knew that these talismans were definitely different from each other. Looking at the swimming talismans, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to immerse his spiritual consciousness into a talisman that had just drifted in front of him. Just as his spiritual consciousness entered, he felt a wave of fatigue in his head. However, this time, Zhang Xiaohua did not withdraw his spiritual consciousness immediately, but insisted on immersing it in the inner layer. As his spiritual consciousness penetrated deeper, the fatigue became more and more serious, and there was even a slight prickling pain. Zhang Xiaohua was a little hesitant, not knowing if he should persist. But at this moment, the talisman emitted a milky white brilliance, producing a strong suction force. It pulled Zhang Xiaohua's spiritual consciousness tightly, as if it was about to absorb it. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was not alarmed but happy. He was most afraid that no matter how he probed, the talisman would not respond. However, at this moment, just immersing it in for a while, it produced a suction force. Presumably, he needed to send his spiritual consciousness into the talisman. Finished thinking, Zhang Xiaohua slightly controlled his spiritual consciousness and let his spiritual consciousness slowly enter the talisman. As his spiritual consciousness was absorbed, the talisman's brilliance became more and more brilliant. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not use his eyes to look, there was a dazzling feeling. When his spiritual consciousness was about to be completely absorbed, the brilliance was extremely brilliant. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua calmly took out 2 small primordial stones from his arms, one in each hand, and operated the jade blood elixir refining technique. The true qi in the meridians of his whole body slowly turned into heart fire and directly burned the elixir refining technique. Since Zhang Xiaohua practiced the Carefree Heart Sutra to the 6th level, his spiritual consciousness was extremely profound. Cultivating the jade blood elixir refining technique had little effect, so he did not practice it much. At this time, when he saw his spiritual consciousness was about to be absorbed, he immediately thought of this technique. Sure enough, when the heart fire burned the elixir refining technique, it was immediately absorbed by the brilliant talisman. After the brilliance was extremely bright, it gradually dimmed. At this time, the talisman was no longer in the shape of a tadpole, but slowly revealed its original appearance. However, it was still somewhat faint and could not be seen clearly. Seeing that this technique was effective, Zhang Xiaohua left and operated the Heart Sutra. He absorbed the heaven and earth primordial qi from the primordial stones into his meridians to replenish the true qi that had turned into heart fire. With the new supply of primordial qi, the heart fire was not extinguished and was slowly absorbed by the talisman. After absorbing for an entire afternoon, the talisman gradually revealed its true form. It was actually in the shape of a cute rabbit. What kind of talisman was this? Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat aghast. Following the complete appearance of the rabbit talisman, a set of extremely complex techniques containing 365 different finger techniques immediately appeared in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. Zhang Xiaohua carefully comprehended it. Wasn't this the technique of the rabbit talisman? Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. Just as she was about to comprehend it further, a huge feeling of exhaustion came from her mind. There was actually a feeling of exhaustion. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to try again. She immediately withdrew her divine sense and let the golden array revolve around the elixir refining technique. She silently operated the Heart Sutra and adjusted her breathing. After the time it took to eat a meal, the true qi of the 6th level of the Worry-Free Heart Sutra had circulated through the meridians of her entire body a few times. Her entire body felt comfortable, and only then did she stop. After a little check, Zhang Xiaohua found that the Worry-Free Heart Sutra had not made any progress, but her divine sense had increased. However, there was a slight, throbbing pain in her mind. Presumably, the true qi that she had used to cultivate the cultivation method had been supplied to the talisman all the time. It had long exceeded the capacity of her mud-pill palace, and thus caused the injury. After thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to continue comprehending, for fear that going too far would be as bad as not going far enough. At this time, the sky had already turned dark, and she did not know whether Nie Qinyu had woken up or not. Zhang Xiaohua floated down to the ground and came to the door of Nie Qinyu's room. She gently knocked on the door again, and there was still a light snoring sound coming from the room. Presumably, Nie Qinyu was still sleeping soundly. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. For the past 10 days, Chinyu must have been exhausted and did not dare to sleep. She only completely relaxed when she saw her. How could she be sleeping soundly? After waiting for a while with her hands clasped behind her back, Zhang Xiaohua went to the front of the inn to find some porridge and side dishes and brought them back. The innkeeper knew that the guest had met with a calamity. He was afraid that Zhang Xiaohua would be angry, so he carefully accompanied her and welcomed her with a smile. Zhang Xiaohua did not bother to explain to him, so she took the food box and left. After Zhang Xiaohua put the food box on the table and lit the lamp, Chinyu was finally awakened by the bright light in front of her eyes. Rubbing her hazy eyes, Chinyu's face was burning. She asked in a low voice, "Brother Rin, have you been accompanying me all this time?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "No, I also went back to my room to sleep. I just woke up and thought that you must be hungry, so I called you to get up and eat something." While they were talking, they heard Chinyu's stomach growling. Chinyu's face was burning even more. Zhang Xiaohua opened the lid of the food box and said, "Come, little fishy, eat something first, and then go back to sleep." "Okay." Chinyu nodded and said, "Brother Rin, you should eat too." Zhang Xiaohua said, "There's no need. I've already eaten. This is for you." After saying that, he was about to scoop rice for Chinyu. How could Chinyu let him scoop rice for her? She hurriedly jumped off the Kong bed and ran over without even wearing her shoes. "Let me do it. Brother Rin, you should rest." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Sit down, little fishy. Your wrist must not be completely healed. If it is injured again, won't you need to rest for many days?" Chinyu was a little embarrassed and said, "Then I will have to trouble Brother Rin." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and did not say anything. He took out the side dishes and the porridge and placed it on the table. He stood at the side and smiled as he watched Chinyu eat in small bites. Chinyu seemed to have never eaten as well as today. She actually finished the small pot of porridge. After putting down the bowl and chopsticks, Chinyu said embarrassedly, "Brother Rin, you have never seen me eat so much, right?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Of course, when I saw you before, I only tasted a little. Today, it was an eye-opener for me. You can eat more than me." Chinyu smiled and said, "Brother Rin, you have never seen so much. Take your time to broaden your horizons." After saying that, she seemed to feel a little inappropriate and lower her head slightly. However, she immediately raised her head and asked, "Brother Rin, is there any news about Little Orange?" After saying that, she laughed at herself and said, Brother Rin just said that he was resting in the room. I was too anxious." Zhang Xiaohua said, "I asked around outside first, but there were no good clues. I will go out later. Maybe I will find something at night." "I see." Chinyu was a little disappointed and said, "Then be careful. Don't do anything inappropriate." "Okay." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and walked to the table to clear the bowls and chopsticks. She said, "You should rest. You probably haven't slept well for many days. Go to bed. Maybe you can see Little Orange tomorrow." "Really?" Chinyu was a little excited. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "I am just comforting you. I am not a god. How can I find him so quickly?" Sigh. Chinyu sighed and said, "I can't help you. I just want to sleep." "Go to sleep. You will be the biggest. Help to me if you rest." Chinyu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was not polite at all. She could only twitch her mouth and sit in front of the Kong bed again. Zhang Xiaohua took the food box out and shouted, "Little you, lock the door." "Got it. Go." Chinyu said weakly, "Go and come back early." -3. Chapter 396. Why would Zhang Xiaohua need to leave the house personally? He returned the food box to the inn and returned to the house. He sat cross-legged and released his divine perception. Although there was still some pain in his head, it was not a big deal for him to use his divine perception to observe. Pingyang City was really lively at night. There were all kinds of things. Zhang Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. His divine perception followed a few sneaky thieves and watched a few filthy dramas. Then he hurriedly escaped. See no evil. There were also a few places where tragic tragedies happened. Zhang Xiaohua really could not stand it anymore. Although he knew that this would alert the enemy and spoil his plan, he really could not remain indifferent when he saw innocent people about to lose their lives. Hence, he raised the small sword in his arms again and stopped them in time before harm happened. Of course, after the first time, there would be a second time and a third time. For the entire first half of the night, Zhang Xiaohua did not do anything else. He only enforced justice on behalf of the heavens and helped the weak. This sudden black light saved many people. From then on, the legend of Lunar Shadow was born in Pingyang City. After being the savior of the commoners for half a night, Zhang Xiaohua was really exhausted. When midnight came, he immediately fell into a deep sleep. As Zhang Xiaohua flickered in his dream, a mysterious wave was emitted from his body. The starlight in the endless starry sky was instantly projected. As usual, it gathered into a cocoon-like ball of light around his body. After a long time, the wave around Zhang Xiaohua's body changed rapidly. The light cocoon wrapped around his body suddenly expanded, as if it was attracted by something inside his body. Then it was sucked into Zhang Xiaohua's body like a whale sucking in water. At the same time, Zhang Xiaohua's bones, which had been refined to the point that they were transparent, became completely transparent in an instant. Then, on many parts of the transparent bones, traces of red appeared. At this moment, there was no more starlight around Zhang Xiaohua's body. The wave around his body surged a few times and adjusted to another mysterious amplitude. Gradually it stabilized. As the wave stabilized, starlight was projected from the horizon again. In an instant, it enveloped his entire body. However, who would know if this starlight was the same starlight? The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua had just gone to the courtyard to practice her martial arts when she heard Nie Qinyu running out of the house happily. She raised her head and looked around, but to no avail. Disappointed, she asked, "Brother Rin, did you not find little Orange last night?" Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to stop. She said apologetically, "Little you, I exaggerated a little last night. I searched the entire Pingyang city, but did not find any clues." Nie Qinyu said desolately, "It's all right, big brother Rin. How can anything in this world be done just because you said so? Little Orange has been missing for 10 days. It will be difficult to start looking for him now. Moreover, I know that what you said yesterday was just to comfort me. You wanted me to have a good rest." Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose and smiled. "Little you is really smart. I'll go out and look again today. Maybe I'll find something." Nie Qinyu's eyes lit up and said, "I understand. Big brother Rin, are you looking for a blind fortune teller today?" Shaking her head, Zhang Xiaohua said helplessly, "Yes, I am." "That's great, big brother Rin. It's a little difficult, but I hope you can work harder. Please don't give up, okay?" Nie Qinyu sounded like she was pleading at the end. In fact, Nie Qinyu could not be blamed for not trusting Zhang Xiaohua. It was just that before Zhang Xiaohua left them, she was indifferent to them and did not like to interfere. Therefore, she was really afraid that Zhang Xiaohua would give up. If it was in the past, Zhang Xiaohua might hesitate and consider whether she would expose her background if she acted in Pingyang City. But now, she was full of chivalry and naturally would not decline too much. She smiled and said, "Look at what you're saying, little you are. Along the way, we've developed feelings for each other. How could I possibly give up?" The word feelings was not used appropriately. Yes, it was really worth the 3 months of studying the 3-character classic. Nie Qinyu's forehead flushed red. She didn't mean it, but the listener took it seriously. Then Nie Qinyu smiled and said, "Big brother Rin, I won't hold you back from practicing martial arts." After that, she bounced back to the house like a little swallow, as if her wrist was not injured at all. Looking at Nie Qinyu's cheerful back view, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and continued practicing the Big Dipper magical fist. After practicing the Big Dipper magical fist for a few days, Zhang Xiaohua felt that his strength seemed to have increased by a lot. Therefore, he paid more attention to this fist technique. Late in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua went out of the inn with his hands behind his back. In fact, he could stay in the inn, but after all, Nie Qinyu was beside him. If he stayed in the house alone, Nie Qinyu would blame him for being lazy, and there would be no reason for her to find any clues in the future. There were many people from all walks of life in Pingyang City, and there were even a few blind fortune-tellers. Zhang Xiaohua found a tea house and ordered some fragrant tea. As he tasted the tea, he used his divine senses to monitor these blind men. It was easy to say, but difficult to do. Zhang Xiaohua had to look at this and that at the same time, lest he missed the real murderer. He could only see, but he could not really hear the conversation between the blind man and the others. Therefore, most of the time he had to pay attention to the shape of their mouths and the changes in their expressions. He had to guess what they were thinking to determine if there was anything wrong with what they were doing. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua had an unusually hard time drinking the tea. Almost all the waiters in the tea house were muttering at the side, "Is there something wrong with this guy's brain? Why is he so flustered when he's just drinking tea?" When the sky turned dark, those blind men left their stalls and went back to their homes. Zhang Xiaohua followed them closely, but he still did not find anything. The only thing he found was a stomach full of tea. Nie Qinyu was also obedient. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had returned empty-handed, she did not pursue the matter. She only served the food in the inn and comforted him gently. "Don't worry. Heaven helps the worthy. Perhaps there will be news tomorrow." Zhang Xiaohua ate 2 mouthfuls hastily and returned to the house. He pondered carefully. Although his divine senses were powerful and could monitor several blind fortune-tellers in Pingyang City at the same time, it was after all an act of waiting. He did not know which blind man was the real culprit. Moreover, if the culprit did not disguise himself as a blind man, what should he do? For a moment, he was filled with worry. The direct result of Zhang Xiaohua's worry was to release the small sword. With the power of a thunderbolt, he showed the will of heaven and punished many people who took advantage of the dark to do evil in Pingyang City. It was only late into the night that his worry subsided. The next day, Zhang Xiaohua left the inn early. However, this time he did not sit in the tea house. Instead, he rode out of Pingyang City on the David's Deer. These 2 nights of eliminating pornography and illegal activities in Pingyang City had already shown some results. There were more and more cases of people helping the elderly cross the road. The bad guys who kidnapped the young girls were not really blind. They would definitely sense something. The best way was to look around Pingyang City and see if he could find some clues. However, when he exited the west gate of Pingyang City, he realized that the city gate was slightly different from before. Ever since Zhang Xiaohua came to Pingyang City for the first time 6 years ago, and the numerous times he entered and left Pingyang City after that, he had not met any soldiers at the city gate. However, today there were actually a few soldiers guarding the west gate of Pingyang City. They interrogated the passers-by one, especially the horse carriages and the like. The inspection was especially detailed. Even Zhang Xiaohua, who was all alone, was interrogated in detail. They also looked at his strange steed from left to right, up and down. They only let him leave the city when they confirmed that there was nothing more to ask. As for the passers-by who entered the city, they did not interrogate them at all. Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. However, he had never been very interested in the officials, and thus could not be bothered to ask. Of course, even if he wanted to find out, he might not be able to get anything. He could tell just by looking at those soldiers who treated the passers-by like wolves and tigers. Zhang Xiaohua followed his own train of thought and carefully checked the east, west, and north of Pingyang City for several days. He did not discover anything, even though he was more than 10 miles away from the city. He even checked the surroundings of the ethereal heights in detail. However, the Righteous Alliance had already taken over the heights, and Zhang Xiaohua did not go deep inside. With the reputation of the Righteous Alliance in the pugilistic world, they would not do such a heinous thing. Even if the Righteous Alliance wanted to do it, they would definitely not choose Pingyang City. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua only looked around the surroundings. Huanqi Heights seemed to be like what Qiuju had said. There were not many changes, and everyone had their own business. However, all these had nothing to do with Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, he did not rashly go there and try to establish old ties with Tian Zhongxi and Ma Jing. It was already dusk. Zhang Xiaohua returned from the east side of Pingyang City. This day he had walked dozens of miles away from the city and found many villages and forests. He had also used his divine perception to check many places that were rarely visited, but to no avail. Now he only had not seen the south side of Pingyang City. However, he had entered from the south gate and did not see anything strange along the way. It seemed that if there was no special miracle, he could only apologize to Nie Qinyu. However, at the thought of little Orange's voice and smile, after not seeing them for more than 10 days, Zhang Xiaohua felt a wave of sadness in his heart. If he did not leave the two of them alone in Pingyang City, and instead brought them to the Guozhuang house, even Lu Town, would they be able to avoid this disaster? The more he thought about it, the more guilty Zhang Xiaohua felt. He felt that he really should not have avoided these two girls so much. Just as he was thinking, from the east gate of Pingyang City came a big dung cart carrying farm treasures. An unpleasant stench assailed his nostrils. Many people on the side of the road covered their noses to avoid it. Zhang Xiaohua grew up in a farmer's house. Naturally, he was not unfamiliar with this smell and did not take it seriously. However, Zhang Xiaohua was riding on the back of the deer. Huan had always had a habit of walking in the middle of the road. This time was no exception. As they were about to bump into the dung cart, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly patted Huan's head, indicating for it to quickly make way for the cart. Although he was not afraid of this smell, it would not be good if he bumped into the cart and got himself covered in farm treasures. However, just as Huan brushed past the dung cart, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but frown. -3. Chapter 397. Although Zhang Xiaohua had not given himself any farm fertilizer for a long time, he had seen farm treasures since he was young. Naturally, he would not frown just because he was close to them. The reason why he was like this was because he realized that there was something wrong with the two coachmen. Farm treasures naturally referred to the dung in the fields. This large dung cart must have taken the dung from the toilets of the people in Pingyang City and brought it back to the fields to be fertilized. Normally, when farmers did this kind of work, they would drive along the side of the road and drive the cart carefully. They were afraid that they would annoy the passers-by and embarrass their family. Moreover, this kind of work was not a dignified job. Who would swagger in the middle of the road? Furthermore, it was just after the New Year. It was not a proper day to dig dung in the fields. If the crops were growing and needed a large amount of fertilizer, it was understandable that 2 strong laborers would go to the city to dig dung. However, there was no need to rush to fertilize the fields. They were just pulling the dung back and storing it first. Why would they need 2 people to do this kind of idle work? Of course, the 2 of them might have come together to be companions, or because it was on the way. However, since they were here to dig dung, they should not cover their noses. Their family was the first to despise this farm treasures. They really did not have any professionalism at all. From this point of view, how could Zhang Xiaohua not be able to conclude that there was something wrong with these 2 coachmen who were digging dung? Sigh, these 2 coachmen were also pitiful. Of all the people they could meet, they just had to meet this hero Rin who grew up in the countryside. Yes, he was also a hero who was extremely proficient in farm fertilizer. Zhang Xiaohua brushed past the large dung cart. In order not to attract their attention, he did not stop. Instead, he continued to move forward until he could no longer see the shadow of the cart. Then he patted the head of David's deer and turned around to chase after the cart. Zhang Xiaohua was not in a hurry. Anyway, he could use his spiritual sense. He just needed to hang from a distance. He would definitely not be discovered by them. The dung cart kept going east until it was dark. The two men got off the cart and looked around to make sure that there was no one around. Then, they drove the dung cart into a small forest. Not long after, they came out again. At this time, the wooden buckets of dung on the cart were gone. Zhang Xiaohua saw with her divine sense that the two men covered their noses as they carried the wooden buckets out of the cart and casually threw them in the forest. The carriage continued on its journey. Not long after, it came to a small fork in the road. The coachman skillfully drove towards the small path in the southwest direction. It was a muddy path that could barely allow a carriage to pass through. In front of it, there was a patch of lights. It seemed to be a very small village. The two of them entered the manor and did not hesitate. They went straight to a dark courtyard at the entrance of the village and knocked on the courtyard door rhythmically. Immediately, an old man's head popped out. He first looked into the distance, then opened the courtyard door and said angrily, "You two brats, why did you just arrive? Hurry up and come in." The two of them did not dare to speak. They looked at each other and drove the carriage into the courtyard. Before the carriage came to a stop, the old man asked, "Have you brought the item? The days are getting closer and closer. If we still can't complete the task, the commander will blame us." One of them, who was slightly taller, smiled apologetically and said, "Banner Master Gao, don't worry. Although we are 2 days late this time, we still brought the item on time. We didn't delay the commander's matters. You make it sound so easy. I have waited here for a few days. How can I not be anxious? The date that the commander has requested is approaching." "Oh, right. Why did you delay for so long?" "Ah, don't mention it. Sai, don't talk about it anymore. Our days in Pingyang City have been tough as well. You don't know that Pingyang City has been haunted for the past 2 days. Many of my subordinates, yes, not only me, but also the brothers in other territories, when they went out to work at night, they all met a monster that they called Legend of Lunar Shadow. My goodness, you haven't seen it before. All you saw was a flash of black light and everything creaked. You were all turned into spare parts. This person was very long-winded and even said, "You don't understand" a few times. This made Banner Master Gao very unhappy. At this moment, the person beside him smiled apologetically and said, "Old Master Gao, just as my brother said, the city has been rather chaotic these few days. As long as the brothers in the underworld go out to work, there will always be some strange things interfering. Therefore, for the sake of the commander's grand plan, I have no choice but to shrink my head and act carefully." When Banner Master Gao heard this, his expression softened a little. He said, "It's not easy for you guys either. You have delivered a lot of good stuff. If the commander asks about it, I will definitely report to him and reward you handsomely." The two of them were overjoyed. They cupped their fists and said, "Thank you for your guidance, Banner Master Gao." At this moment, Banner Master Gao sniffled and lowered his head slightly to look at his feet. Then he said, "Oh, right, what is the legend of Lunar Shadow that you mentioned just now? Tell me about it in detail." "It's like this," reporting to Banner Master. "None of us have seen what it is exactly. It's just a flash of black light. If it's not cutting off people's limbs, it's breaking their tendons and bones. 2 people's ears were also cut off. Yes, and at this point, the two of them had a strange expression. They were gloating and almost laughed out loud. They said, 'Fatty Nyo from the west of the city went to rape women at night. The thing under him was also ha 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 ha.'" Banner Master Gao's expression changed slightly. He said, "Could it be an expert from the Jianghu? Or an expert from the Righteous Alliance?" The two of them laughed and said, "We don't know about this. However, I don't think the Righteous Alliance would ignore us. Moreover, at first, we did suspect that it was an expert who had lost his martial arts. However, the black light appeared almost at the same time in the west and east of the city. Even if it was an expert in martial arts, it's impossible for him to attack in 2 places at the same time. What kind of lightness skill was that? There's actually such a strange thing. Could it be that several experts from the Jianghu attacked at the same time? Ah." The two of them couldn't help but shrink their necks. They said, Pingyang City is already the territory of the Righteous Alliance. Such a big sect that could even destroy the Misty School. How could they allow other experts to act arrogantly in Pingyang City? This, even a fool may be right. What you said makes sense. Forget it. Anyway, Commander Master has more or less collected the amount. It should be time to hand over the order. Sigh. I just don't know why Commander Master dares to let us do these things under the nose of the Righteous Alliance. It's really hard to understand. The person who spoke first laughed and said, Banner Master Gao, I don't know about this. That day, I specially asked Blind Man Fan. Guess what he said? Banner Master Gao was unhappy again. He snorted and sniffled again. Inconspicuously, he rubbed his feet on the ground a few times. The person next to him laughed and said, Don't blame him, Banner Master. Blind Man Fan only said one thing. The most dangerous place is the safest place. Banner Master Gao said disdainfully, Everyone can say this. Do you think I don't know? If you don't have enough skills, everywhere is a dangerous place. This only shows that our commander is highly skilled in martial arts and wise. Commander Master is mighty. The two of them quickly shouted. Shoo! Banner Master Gao said, Keep your voices down. Don't attract the attention of others. As he spoke, he sniffled. He couldn't help but raise his feet to take a closer look. The two of them laughed and said, Is Banner Master Gao tired? Let us massage your legs for you. Banner Master Gao was sweating profusely. He waved his hands and said, No, I'm not tired at all. It's just that. Where did this stench come from? I don't think I stepped on any dog shit. You guys wouldn't have stepped on it even if you drove here. Ah, this. The two of them looked at each other in dismay. One of them said cautiously that, Banner Master, it's not that you stepped on dog shit. It's that the carriage that we came on was loaded with big shit. Big shit? Banner Master Gao was stunned. He said, Why did you guys give up on your great career as a pawn and change your profession to digging for big shit? At this time, Zhang Xiaohua had already followed them to the entrance of the village. She left the David's deer in the field and floated down. She looked around carefully. With a sway of her body, she used the earth escape to the side of the small courtyard. She hid herself and stuck out her ears from the corner of the wall to listen carefully. The smarter man laughed and said, Banner Master Gao, you should take a look at the goods first. Then you'll know the reason. Banner Master Gao was puzzled. What did this thing have to do with big shit? However, he still pinched his nose and walked to the front of the carriage. He saw that the man activated some mechanism on the carriage. In the middle of the carriage, where there was some feces and urine, there was a small crack. Through the crack, some clothes could be seen. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense suddenly saw a thin little girl wearing beautiful clothes. Instantly, Zhang Xiaohua's heart understood. It seemed that she was really lucky. Just when she was about to give up, she actually met the right person. If she wasn't wrong, it should be this group of people who kidnapped Little Orange. Sigh. Little Orange wasn't destined to die yet. However, Zhang Xiaohua was as puzzled as Banner Master Gao. Although she was very suspicious of this big shit carriage and used her divine sense to scan it, why didn't she find any clues? She had to admit that this carriage's mechanism was very well hidden. The man carried the little girl out of the mechanism of the carriage. The little girl's eyes were tightly shut and her breathing was even. She must have been drugged with some kind of drug. Banner Master Gao looked at the little girl and couldn't help but frown. To be honest, he really couldn't see how this little girl had anything to do with this big shit carriage. This specially made carriage used to transport some secret items. It was reasonable that this little girl was hidden in the mechanism. However, what did she have to do with this stinky big shit? After thinking for a moment, Banner Master Gao's eyes lit up. He said, The two of you actually used this big shit to cover your tracks? Could it be that the so-called legend of Lunar Shadow in Pingyang City made you so afraid? Hearing this, the two of them gave him a thumbs up and said, Banner Master Gao, you're really smart. Sigh, Banner Master Gao was unhappy again. -3. Chapter 398. Sigh, how can you flatter your leader like this? Banner Master Gao was speechless. Fortunately, the Prime Minister is magnanimous, so Banner Master Gao couldn't take them seriously. The clever man said Banner Master Gao is wise. That legend of Moonshadow is only one aspect. This legend has forced us not to work at night, but since you've been urging us, we have no choice but to work during the day. Ah, you guys are really bold. Banner Master Gao looked at his 2 loyal lackeys and laughed. How dare you kidnap someone on the streets? Old Dog Fan is blind. TSK, TSK, who knows how many lost lambs he has fooled. The man took the opportunity to say, it's all because of Banner Master Gao and Commander Ling's good leadership. That's why we were so bold. Good. I understand your intentions. Banner Master Gao was very pleased. He asked, then, what's the other aspect? That should be the main point. You're wise. Look at this little girl. What's the difference between her and the girls in the past? Banner Master Gao sighed. It's very unwise to question your superiors like this. However, he still took a closer look. Then he slapped the man's face and said angrily, this child's skin is soft and tender. She's also wearing silk and satin. She's obviously different from the girls in the past. Needless to say, it must be you guys who are bold enough to kidnap the child of a wealthy family. How many times have I told you, although the head commander is urging us, it's best that we don't provoke the children of these wealthy families. Who knows which one of them has connections with the higher-ups? If we cause trouble, not only will all our previous contributions be erased, we might even lose our own lives. The man was hurt, but didn't dare to make a sound. The other man immediately stepped forward and said, don't worry, Banner Master Gao. Firstly, this girl is rich and she's not a noble. I don't think she'll cause trouble. Secondly, I've always been reliable. You know this too. How can I let anyone have something against me? I saw that the 4 gates of Pingyang City were guarded by soldiers. So, I got a big dung cart and secretly gave the guards 2 taels of silver. That guy let me out. Haha, he was bought over with just 2 taels of silver. That's really cheap. Oh, Banner Master Gao was interested. He said, tell me, which family is this girl from? How did you get your hands on her? The man smiled and said, actually, it's quite a coincidence. Didn't I hook up with an attractive kitchen maid at a rich merchant's house in the east of the city? A few days ago, I didn't dare to go out to do anything, so I let Blind Fan set up his stall alone while I went to the east of the city to have some fun. In the end, I didn't find any fun, but I heard 2 little brats fighting over this little girl in the back garden of the rich merchant's house. One said that he was this little girl's older brother and that he should take good care of her, while the other said that he was this little girl's younger brother and that they should treat each other intimately. Tell me, Bannerman Gao, how can this rich merchant's child know how to hook up with girls at such a young age? Banner Master Gao coughed and didn't answer. The man chuckled and continued, I heard this girl ask them how they knew her birthday. I heard the older child say, you are born on the 7th day of the 7th month. You are the most charming because of the 7-7 technique. Of course I know. You say, Banner Master Gao, isn't this a case of traveling far and wide looking for something only to find it without any effort? We worked so hard to get a blind man to find out her birth characters, but I was able to find her just because I wanted to have some fun. Isn't this a credit given to me by the heavens? So, I jumped out without saying a word and knocked the 3 little brats out. I carried this girl and left. Oh! Banner Master Gao smiled and said, you are quite lucky. We haven't found anything suitable for you for many days, but you found it so quickly. Looks like you can't avoid the reward from the commander. The man grinned and said, it's just that the city gates have been closely guarded by the officials these few days. I couldn't deliver it in time. I've made Banner Master Gao wait for a long time. Oh, it's okay. Banner Master Gao said generously, I'm just giving you directions. You have to work hard for everything." Before he finished speaking, he suddenly realized something and hurriedly asked, "What did you say just now? There are soldiers guarding the city gates of Pingyang City?" "Yes, Banner Master Gao. I made it very clear just now. It's because those soldiers have gone crazy and are guarding the city gates. They made things difficult for me, and I didn't dare to take the risk. That's why I delivered it so late." "You—" Banner Master Gao didn't know what to say. He asked, "Do you know how long it has been since there were soldiers guarding the city gates?" The man scratched his head and said, "I've been in Pingyang City for more than 4 years, but I don't think I've seen anyone guarding the city." "That's right. Don't you think there's a reason why the city gate is suddenly being watched so tightly after 4 years without anyone guarding it?" "Banner Master Gao, you can just say what you want to say. I'm stupid. How would I know about the affairs of the soldiers? Maybe the officials are just doing an inspection and are just putting on an act?" Sigh. Banner Master Gao looked as if he expected better from them. He said, "Didn't you contact this girl?" Ah. At this moment, the two men realized what was going on. They looked at each other and their eyes were filled with fear. They said in a trembling voice, "Is it because we kidnapped this little girl? But she's just a relative of a wealthy merchant. I'm sure that this wealthy merchant only has a little bit of relationship with the officials. I heard this from the cook." Banner Master Gao shook his head and looked at the two men who were ignorant and fearless. He said, "Fortunately, you actually knew how to use money to trick the soldiers into letting you go. If you were caught by them, you wouldn't have any chance of survival." As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and realized that something was wrong. However, he couldn't figure out what it was. He couldn't help but frown and think hard. The two men realized that they had gotten into big trouble. They looked at the little girl in their hands and didn't know if they should carry her or throw her away. At this moment, Banner Master Gao suddenly asked in a loud voice, "You said that you gave 2 coins of broken silver to the soldiers?" "Yes," the man replied. "I won against them last night and gave it to them casually." "Banner Master Gao, you don't have to worry about it. Consider it my own allowance, and you don't have to reimburse me." "Pa!" Banner Master Gao's slap landed on the other side of the man's face. The man was puzzled. He didn't want the organization to fork out money, so he had to fork out money for nothing. Was that wrong? Looking at the man's confused expression, Banner Master Gao angrily scolded, "You're an idiot! Don't you know that you're pretending to be a farmer in the countryside? Don't you have a brain? Who in this farmer's yard would pay 2 coins for a cart of dung? Even if it's 2 coins, they would have to think twice." Ah? The two men were dumbfounded. Of course, which farmer would be stupid enough to pay money for a few buckets of dung? If the crops irrigated by this manure were gold, it might be possible. "Then what should we do?" one of the men asked. The other man said, "It doesn't matter. We threw the dung in the forest by the side of the road before we reached the fork in the road. They probably won't be able to find this place." Banner Master Gao raised his hand. The man had already noticed it and immediately turned his head to the side to avoid it. However, the old man waved his hand and another crisp slap was heard. Banner Master Gao angrily said, "You idiot! The smell of dung is so strong. How could it not leave a trace and smell on the road? You're causing trouble for me." After he finished speaking, he took the little girl from the man's hands. The man said, "All right, then we'll send her back. Perhaps there won't be any problems." Banner Master Gao sneered and said, "You think it's easy. This child is in our hands. The officials won't let us off easily. It's too late to send her over now. In any case, your master's martial arts are superb. Why should we be afraid of the officials? It'll be our merit if we send her back to your master. Let him deal with this troublesome burden." That's right. Banner Master Gao is wise. The two men were not stingy with their flattery. "All right, since that's the case, let's leave quickly. The sooner we leave, the better." After he finished speaking, Banner Master Gao was about to leave with the little girl under his arm. The two men immediately called out, "Banner Master Gao, You're a master who comes and goes, but we don't know lightness techniques. What should we do?" Banner Master Gao pointed at the inferior horses in the carriage and said, "You brought one horse. There's another in the stable behind my house. Each of you will take one horse. I'll take the goods and use my lightness techniques to travel. What do you think?" The two men were so moved that snot and tears flowed out of their noses. They said, "Banner Master Gao is indeed virtuous. You love your subordinates so much. You'd rather walk by yourself and give the horses to us. We're so touched." Banner Master Gao smiled and said, "No need to be so polite. I have always loved my soldiers like my children. Work hard in the future and bring my spirit to greater heights. I'm going to walk, so I'll go first. You can ride your horses and follow me." Seeing the two men nod, Banner Master Gao exerted force with his feet and leaped onto the roof, shooting toward the west like lightning. The two men in the courtyard had looks of envy on their faces. They hurriedly unloaded the horses from the carriage and led them to the stable behind the house. When the two men got on their horses and galloped toward the south, a slender shadow suddenly appeared in the quiet courtyard. It was Hero Zhang Xiaohua, who had been eavesdropping for a long time. Standing in the courtyard and smelling the faint stench, Zhang Xiaohua frowned. Banner Master Gao was right. With such a strong stench, if the soldiers were to chase after them, there was no way they wouldn't come here. However, it was already late. Should she chase them south or not? Even if she chased them, wouldn't she still fall asleep at midnight? How could she keep up with them? Just as she was thinking, she suddenly discovered something with her divine sense. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but smile. -3, Chapter 399. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was wondering if he should chase after him, his divine sense suddenly detected that Banner Master Gao, who had already run out of the village, suddenly turned around and hid behind a huge pile of firewood by the side of the road. Not long after, two burly men on two horses galloped past the road. As they walked, they said, "Banner Master Gao's martial arts are indeed extraordinary. He disappeared in such a short time. He's even faster than a horse. Oh, and he's even bringing someone with him. AI, who knows how long it'll take for us brothers to reach such a level of cultivation." In the dark night, the sound of the horses' hooves was quite loud and traveled quite a distance. When the two horses were far away, Banner Master Gao finally came out from behind the pile of firewood. Looking at the dark night, he turned around and actually headed back to the village. When Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense saw this, he was very surprised. Soon after, he understood that this Banner Master Gao really had some skills. Seeing that Banner Master Gao had returned to the small courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua quickly floated up to the wall and carefully bent down to observe his every move. He saw that Banner Master Gao had the little girl under his arm and didn't let go. He only went into the house to tidy up and put away some things. This time he left the house without even closing the door and floated back into the house. Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself, "This guy is really cautious, but with his movements, I still have to chase after him." Thinking this, he wasn't in a hurry. With his divine sense monitoring him, he guessed that Banner Master Gao wouldn't be able to escape. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense while heading toward the village entrance. He wanted to call out to Huan Huan, but after just 2 steps, a smile appeared on his face again. Of course, Banner Master Gao couldn't continue running after reaching the north side of the village. Instead, he went downstairs to another clean courtyard and entered it. A crafty rabbit has 3 burrows. This popular phrase instantly appeared in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. Zhang Xiaohua came to the entrance of the village and pulled Huan Huan to sit on the pile of firewood at the entrance of the village. She used her spiritual perception to observe for a long time and did not see any movement from Banner Master Gao. Presumably, he would be resting here tonight. This was exactly what Zhang Xiaohua wanted. He also went into the pile of firewood and closed his eyes to cultivate. The next day, Zhang Xiaohua woke up. Before she even opened her eyes, she heard the clamor of people and horses outside. Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense and saw that the small village had already been surrounded by many armed soldiers. The small courtyard where Bannerman Gao had appeared earlier had already been discovered. Many soldiers were searching inside. Moreover, there were small groups of soldiers knocking on each door, as if they were searching each house. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua inwardly cursed. With such a commotion, Banner Master Gao must have already fled. When she turned her divine sense to the courtyard where Banner Master Gao had been last night, she found that he was still sleeping soundly. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. How could this guy be so calm? After carefully observing the movements of the soldiers, Zhang Xiaohua nodded inwardly. Indeed, Zhang Xiaohua had always despised the government. She thought that the government was full of worms and incompetent people who didn't need to be taken seriously. However, with her divine sense, she saw that there were many skilled soldiers among the soldiers surrounding the entrance of the village. Moreover, there were a few people with white hair and dressed in official robes. They were carefully looking at the ground and muttering something. Then, as if they had reached a consensus, they walked towards another person on a horse. The person on the horse seemed to be an official. After hearing their suggestion, he frowned and shouted something loudly. Thus, the soldiers who were searching the houses immediately stopped disturbing the villagers and gathered at the entrance of the village. When the soldiers were in formation, the official waved his hand and the entire group of soldiers headed west of the village. Wasn't that the direction the two of them had ridden to last night? However, before the official left, he looked around the entrance of the village as if he was looking for something. It was only when everyone had left that he patted his horses and chased after them. After a while, this small village with an unknown name quieted down again. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua's admiration for this Banner Master Gao surged like a torrential river. This guy was really smart. Last night, he had fainted a shot and then slept soundly in his room. Just like that, he had shaken off the pursuing soldiers. This was similar to the trick Zhang Xiaohua had played in the small town in front of Tanha City. However, looking at his mentality and maturity, Zhang Xiaohua could only hope to catch up. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to understand that sometimes things in this world couldn't be completely solved by force. She also immediately became more wary of this Banner Master Gao, who didn't seem very powerful. Sure enough, less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea after the soldiers had left, Bannerman Gao woke up. He walked out of the door and listened carefully before returning to the courtyard. He found a shabby carriage and pulled out a small donkey from the backyard. He put the donkey on the carriage and then returned to the house. Nobody knew where he found the girl, but he carried her out and casually placed her in the carriage. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was watching with great interest and secretly pondering and seriously studying, a man dressed in martial arts clothes suddenly appeared at the entrance of the village where the military official had been standing. He was even pulling a handsome red horse with him. As he walked, he looked around in a flamboyant manner, as if he was very strange. That man was still mumbling, "What's going on? I just had diarrhea and all these people are gone? Cousin too. Why didn't he tell me when he left? Where did they all go?" Zhang Xiaohua carefully identified the person, and he couldn't help but be overjoyed. This was an old friend. He hadn't seen him for a long time, and Zhang Xiaohua had a special affinity with him. Wasn't this you, Deity, the eldest young master of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, who had studied together with Zhang Xiaohu in the Martial Arts Training Center? Speaking of the great young master Zhang Xiaohua, he indeed had an affinity with Zhang Xiaohua. On the way to Pingyang City to practice martial arts, this fellow had met the two brothers Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu together with Li Jinfeng and Yuluan. They had even entered the city in the same carriage. When Yu Dei was practicing martial arts at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, he had used his family's heirloom cinnabar palm to injure Zhang Xiaohua's right hand. If it wasn't for the fact that Zhang Xiaohua's fist of the North Star had the effect of tempering the bones, it was likely that Zhang Xiaohua's right hand would still be unable to exert any strength. Also, during the martial arts exhibition at the Misty School, Zhang Xiaohua and Yu Dei met again. However, their results were completely different. Zhang Xiaohua had passed several rounds consecutively, while Yu Dei had returned empty-handed, losing all face. Of course, because the results were different, the two of them didn't know each other's battle results. After the martial arts exhibition, they hadn't met again. It had been 5 years since then. Looking at Yu Dei, Zhang Xiaohua's lips curled into a smile. Yes, it was purely a smile of seeing an old friend. It was as if he didn't remember that he had been injured by someone back then. At this time, Banner Master Gao had also gotten on a donkey cart and was heading towards the village entrance. If there were no accidents, the two of them would meet very soon. Putting aside Yu Dei's current martial arts and whether he could be a match for Banner Master Gao, even if Yu Dei could easily take down Banner Master Gao, it would still spoil Zhang Xiaohua's plan of setting a long line to catch a big fish. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua absolutely wouldn't allow Yu Dei to spoil his plans. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua took out a large handkerchief from his bosom and covered his face. With a twist of his body, he used Earth Escape to appear behind Yu Dei. He reached out and grabbed the back of Yu Dei's neck. In a low and hoarse voice, he said, "Brother, if you want to live, then don't speak. Pull on your date red horse and follow me." Then, without waiting for Yu Dei's response, he grabbed his neck and pulled him back. Yu Dei was looking around when he was suddenly grabbed and threatened. Moreover, there was an irresistible force pulling him back. How could he dare to resist? He didn't even dare to speak. He walked backwards while pulling on his date red horse. Before long, the two people and the horse arrived at the village entrance behind several large piles of firewood. At this time, Banner Master Gao happened to be driving his donkey cart out of the village. He stopped at the village entrance for a moment and looked around before heading east. He was going in the opposite direction of the other two people from last night. The donkey cart was moving very slowly. It seemed that Banner Master Gao wasn't in a hurry. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua used his divine sense to slowly follow him. For a short while, he wouldn't be able to escape from his surveillance. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua only let go of his hand when the donkey cart was gradually far away. When Yu Dei felt the person behind him let go, he immediately did a somersault and dodged far away. At the same time, he drew his sword from his waist and pointed it at Yu Dei. He said sternly, "Who are you? Not only are you masked, you even dared to sneak an attack from behind. What are your intentions?" When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, he was secretly amused. He lowered his voice and said in a hoarse voice, "Who are you? Why are you here?" In fact, Zhang Xiaohua's action was unnecessary. When he first met Yu Dei, he was about 14 years old. It was the time when a child's voice changed. Now that he was 18 years old, his voice had already become deeper and was not as sharp as before. Even if he spoke normally, Yu Dei might not be able to recognize him. When Yu Dei heard the other party's question, he frowned and said, "I am Deity, the brother-in-law of the leader of the 4th Troop of the City Guards under the Pingyang City Garrison. I followed him here to suppress the bandits. How dare you kidnap me halfway? Be careful! I will ask my brother-in-law to send troops to kill you." In the end, he was no longer confident. "Deity? Suppress the bandits?" Zhang Xiaohua was laughing in his heart, but his face was serious. He said, "Oh, so you are from the government. You are here to suppress the bandits, not to kidnap a girl. Forget it then. You go your way, and I will go mine. Let's just pretend that you did not see me today." When he finished speaking, Zhang Xiaohua pretended to leave. When Yu Dei heard this, he was not willing to let him go. He shouted, "That thief you! Don't tell me you are the person who kidnapped my niece." As Yu Dei said this, he wanted to draw his sword but did not dare to. He looked around as if looking for help. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked, "Your niece?" Yu Dei looked around and saw that there was no one around. He could only say, "That's right. That girl is from the government. If you know her background, you have to tell me honestly." -3. Chapter 400. At this time, Banner Master Gao's donkey cart had already traveled for a while. Zhang Xiaohua was afraid of delaying the important matter, so she said, "I'll tell you the truth. Your brother-in-law's group has already traveled west. They seem to have found some useful clues. Moreover, I'm not the thief who kidnapped your niece. If you want to find your brother-in-law, you can go west." When Deity heard this, she turned her head to look at the small path to the west. She slowly walked in that direction, but she said, "Since you're not the thief, how do you know that I'm looking for a girl?" Zhang Xiaohua laughed in her belly, but she said, "Yes, this is what I want to tell you. If you want to find your niece, then don't go west." Deity curiously stopped in her tracks and asked, "Why is that?" "Because that's the thief's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain. The people in the west are just small fries. The real thief is riding on a donkey cart." "Ah," Deity said in surprise, "how do you know?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "When I pulled you over just now, that thief drove his cart out of the village. He went straight east." "Why didn't I see him?" Deity was surprised. "Because I'm taller than you." Seeing that the masked man in front of her was only a few fingers taller than her, Deity was speechless. This didn't seem to be a very accurate reason. "Then why didn't you stop him?" "Your martial arts aren't good enough. The two of us should be enough, right? Why don't you chase after him, and I'll go report to my brother-in-law." Zhang Xiaohua shook his head and said, "If I stop him, then I can only save your niece. I won't be able to save anyone else. Moreover, if you go and report the news now, not to mention whether you'll be able to find that thief when you return, it won't be easy for you to find his nest." Deity was also a smart person. She immediately understood Zhang Xiaohua's meaning. "Then you mean to say that we should follow that donkey cart? Just the two of us?" Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, "Nonsense. Do you think I want to take you there? If it weren't for the fact that you'd run into Banner Master Gao just now, and if it weren't for the fact that you'd report to your brother-in-law, who we don't even know if it's true or not, would I have taken you there?" His face was expressionless as he nodded. "There must be a lot of people in the thieves' lair. Just the two of us might not be a match for them. I think we should inform my brother-in-law first." Zhang Xiaohua stared at him coldly without saying a word. Seeing this, Deity felt a chill in his heart and immediately said, "Fine, since your distinguished self's martial arts are so strong, then fine. This one will also risk his life to accompany you. This one will follow you into the wolf's den." Deity understood that this man would definitely not let him go. If he did not follow him, he might be killed immediately. The feeling of being grabbed by the back of his neck was very uncomfortable. "Good, very good. This is Brother Yi's own initiative. I did not force you." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Furthermore, aren't you going there for your niece? Your intentions are commendable." Deity secretly curled his lips. Zhang Xiaohua let out a long whistle, and the 4 deer Huan galloped over from outside the village. When it got close, Zhang Xiaohua floated up and said with a smile, "Brother Yi, why don't you get on the horse?" Deity stared at the mule, dumbfoundedly, and did not say anything for a long time. Finally he asked, "Your distinguished self, you're going to ride this? Can you catch up to that donkey cart?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Isn't it just a donkey cart? It's not a carriage, so why can't we catch up?" They were also speechless. That's right, didn't he just say that it was a donkey cart? Using a mule to chase a donkey was exactly the right thing to do. After thinking for a moment, he sheathed his sword and mounted his horse. With a shake of the reins, the date red horse galloped forward. After traveling for a while, Deity heard a voice behind him, "Brother Yi, it's better to slow down. With this speed, we can catch up with the donkey cart very quickly. It's better for us to stay far away from it. What do you think?" When Deity turned around, her eyeballs almost fell out. That ugly mule was following closely behind her. The masked man was sitting cross-legged on top of it. Looking at the mule's appearance, he seemed to be handling it with ease. Was this still a mule? After Yu Dai recovered from his shock, he immediately stopped looking down on it and followed Zhang Xiaohua's instructions to slow down the speed of the horse. Thus, one horse and one mule slowly moved forward on the small road. Zhang Xiaohua knew what was going on, but Yu Dai could not. From the time he arrived at the entrance of the village until he was tricked by Zhang Xiaohua to the small road, he did not see any trace of the donkey cart. How could he be at ease? He could not help but look at Zhang Xiaohua from the corner of his eyes and thought to himself, "Could it be that this guy's target is the handsome me?" Thinking of this, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. But he saw that the masked man did not even look at him. Instead, he closed his eyes and did not know what he was thinking. He also did not seem to be interested in him. He hoped that he was wrong. Sure enough, after a while, Zhang Xiaohua said, "This guy is really cunning." Then, the two of them continued to move forward. When they passed the fork in the road, Zhang Xiaohua did not hesitate and directly went to another fork in the road to the south. Yu Dai was shocked. How did this guy know to go south? Could it be that he could see further from a high place? He was not that much shorter than him. But soon he understood that this guy was not alone. He must have his helpers ahead of him, and they must have marked the road ahead. So he was no longer afraid. Since he had helpers, he did not need to be a lone hero. All the way to the south, in the direction of Lu Town. Moreover, this time they actually walked for as long as 2 days. Fortunately, Bannerman Gao on the donkey cart did not travel at night. He also traveled in the morning and slept at night. Most of the time, he slept in the night or in the wild. This was good as well. It saved Zhang Xiaohua the trouble of searching for him. But the drowsiness at night was annoying. Zhang Xiaohua had to find a reason to go far away and find a suitable place to sleep. She could only appear the next day. But fortunately, Yu Dai was tactful. She knew that they were already far away from Pingyang City, and she had nothing to rely on. She could only follow this mysterious swordsman. And this swordsman indeed had the same idea as her, which was to save people. So, he listened to Zhang Xiaohua's arrangements and did not run away or act on his own. This afternoon, the donkey cart moved slightly to the east and entered a small path. The speed of the donkey cart was obviously faster. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She immediately used her divine perception to scan ahead. Indeed, there was an extremely quiet village ahead. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. She guessed that this was Bannerman Gao's destination. Zhang Xiaohua said to Yu Dai, "Brother Yi, hurry up. I see that it's already late. I wonder if there's a place to stay ahead?" Yu Dai was stunned. She immediately looked up at the sky and thought to herself, "It's already early. How can it be late? Could it be that this person is talking in his sleep? He seems to be resting with his eyes closed every day. He must be suffering from insomnia at night." But she said, "I'll listen to the swordsman's instructions." Zhang Xiaohua laughed in her heart. She did not reply. She patted Huan's bald head and asked it to speed up. Not long after Bannerman Gao entered the village, the two of them also arrived at a place not far from the village. From afar, they could see the village on the other side of the forest. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and pointed out, "Brother Yi, this small path in the mountains seems to be leading to this village. If I'm not mistaken, the donkey cart must have entered it. Tell me, since it's a small path for people to walk on, do you think that there will be people watching us from the inside?" Yu Dai's heart trembled. She shrunk her neck and said, "Swordsman, can they see us?" "I don't think so. We haven't reached the end of the small path yet. They can't be clairvoyant." Yu Dai listened and let out a long sigh. "That's good. But how are we going to enter the tiger's den? We'll still have to listen to the swordsman's instructions." Zhang Xiaohua looked at the obedient Yu Dai in front of her. He was no longer as arrogant as he was in front of her a few years ago. She turned to look at the village in the distance and said, "This is easy. You can stay here and keep a lookout for me. I'll go and take a look. If there's anything strange, or if there's anything, I'll inform you. What do you think?" "Ah, I see." Yu Dai was surprised when he heard that he did not need to be a lone hero. He only needed to stay at the side to keep a lookout. He could not help but have doubts in his heart. This person brought me here from Pingyang City just to keep a lookout for me? This is unbelievable. Could it be that there's a trap? Seeing Yu Dei's hesitation, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Why don't Brother Yi go in by himself? I'll stay here and keep a lookout for you." Yu Dei smiled bitterly and waved his hand. "Hero, you should go in by yourself. My martial arts skills are limited. It's better for me to stay here and keep a lookout." His tone was far from the high-spirited person he used to be. Zhang Xiaohua found it strange. Haha, that's right. Anyone who lost their confidence after being beaten up by a group of teenagers 5 years ago would be the same. After making the arrangements, Zhang Xiaohua no longer rode on the David's deer. She only used her qinggong and leaped onto the treetops. She leaned forward and moved forward. At this moment, Banner Leader Gao had already driven the donkey cart to the innermost part of the village, in front of a huge manor. The manor's gate was tightly shut. Banner Leader Gao did not find it strange. He jumped off the donkey cart and walked to the front of the gate. He held the door knocker and knocked a few times rhythmically. The gate opened with a creaking sound, and a burly man poked his head out. When he saw Banner Leader Gao, he frowned and said, "Banner Leader Gao, why are you only here now?" Banner Leader Gao quickly cupped his hands and said, "Steward Qi, I was delayed because of some mundane matters. However, I have brought the goods that the commander needs. I hope that Steward Qi can accommodate me." When Steward Qi heard this, he looked at the donkey cart outside and said with a smile, "Banner Leader Gao is still the best. You have completed the commander's order so early. Come, let's go to the Jiaomen. I will open the gate for Banner Leader Gao." Banner Leader Gao cupped his hands and went down the stairs. He drove the donkey cart to the Jiaomen. At this moment, the Jiaomen was already wide open. There was a projector wall facing the Jiaomen. On the projector wall, a huge tiger with a white forehead and white eyes was staring at the donkey cart that was entering the Jiaomen. "Please vote for me." "Thank you." -3. Chapter 401. The manor was surrounded by forests. Many of them were pine trees that didn't shed their leaves even in the winter. They were there to conceal something. However, this was exactly what Zhang Xiaohua wanted. She hid herself in a corner and released her divine sense to carefully observe the surroundings. She saw a very large manor. It seemed to be as big as the entire village. The interior was indeed different from what Zhang Xiaohua had seen before. There were fields and houses in Huanxi Manor. The manor of the South Sea Flood Dragon King in Jinghua City also had mountains and rivers. However, this manor was mostly made up of small houses that looked very neat. Banner Master Gao drove the donkey cart through several crisscrossing paths and stopped in front of a large hall in the middle of the manor. Just as he was about to get off the cart, 2 men dressed in green came out of the large hall. When they saw Banner Master Gao, they said in surprise, "Banner Master Gao, why are you here again? Could it be that you found some good goods?" When Banner Master Gao heard this, he smiled and said, "So it's Banner Master Lu and Banner Master Liang. Are you two also here to offer goods to the commander?" One of the men with a slightly dark face said, "That's not the case. The commander's requirements are a bit high. I really didn't find many suitable goods in my area. I was afraid that the commander would be anxious, so I came to explain to the commander first and ask him to give me more time." The other man also said, "My situation is similar to Banner Master Lu's. I only found a dozen or so people from before and didn't find anything else. A few days ago I found one in town. However, before I could offer her to the commander, I ran into an expert and was saved." Su Lu also had his acupoint sealed, and a group of people lit up a sky lantern. Hearing this, Banner Master Gao was stunned and said, "Why is Su Lu so unlucky?" He actually ran into a group of experts. That Banner Master Liang smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know exactly how many there were. The people who lit up his sky lantern were only ordinary people in town. It's just that Su Lu's acupoints were sealed and he couldn't resist, so he was accidentally burned by the lantern." Banner Master Gao was speechless. Being killed by an expert could only mean that he wasn't skilled enough. Being killed by a group of ordinary people could only mean that he was unlucky. With a sorrowful expression, he said, "Poor Su Lu. Banner Master Liang has lost both his left and right arms. This number is much harder to come by." "That's right. Last night, I personally went to capture that girl and killed a few of her family members and neighbors. It can be considered as revenge for Su Lu. Sigh, Banner Lord Liang. You are truly benevolent and righteous. If Su Lu's spirit is still in the underworld, he will also thank you." When Banner Master Liang heard this, he was very happy and said, "Not at all. We're all brothers, so we naturally have to take revenge." "Oh, that's right, I'm still missing a few. Do you have any extra?" Banner Master Gao hurriedly waved his hand and said, "If it were any other day, perhaps I could spare a few for Banner Master Liang. However, this brother has been in an eventful period in the city these past few days. A few strange things have happened, so I reckon that I won't be able to do anything in the short term." The last girl in the carriage was also obtained by this brother after taking a great risk and losing 2 brothers. "Please forgive me, Banner Master Liang." When the 2 Banner Masters saw that Banner Master Gao was declining, they didn't continue to be long-winded. They cupped their hands and said, "Then congratulations to Banner Master Gao for completing the Command Master's order. Presumably, you will receive a generous reward. Let us congratulate you in advance." Banner Master Gao smiled and said, I wouldn't dare. I'm only serving the Command Master. I don't have to be greedy for merit." Banner Master Liang said, "However, the Command Master isn't here today. Only the Vice Command Master is here. I'm afraid that Banner Master Gao will be disappointed." "Oh, I see." Banner Master Gao indeed looked a little disappointed. He said, "Didn't the Command Master say that he would be here these past few days?" This one. Before he could finish speaking, a dignified voice came from the main hall. "Gao Xionglin, do I still have to report the Command Master's whereabouts to you?" Banner Master Gao's expression was startled. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Vice Command Master Dan, this one was wrong. This one shouldn't have thought too much." The 2 Banner Masters hurriedly bowed as well. At this moment, a tall man walked out from the main hall. He was also wearing a light green robe, and his hair was a little white. This person wore a bronze mask on his face, so his true appearance couldn't be seen. "Why aren't the 2 of you hurrying off to do your business? Can't you see that there aren't many disciples in the manor? They've all gone off to do their business. Why are the 2 of you still standing here chatting?" The masked Vice Command Master Dan said coldly. The 2 Banner Masters didn't dare to tarry. They bowed again and hurriedly left. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua had already hidden herself in the pine tree. She released her divine sense and saw Vice Command Master Dan standing at the main hall's entrance. Zhang Xiaohua frowned. She tried to use her divine sense to see, through the bronze mask, to see Vice Command Master Dan's true appearance. However, just as her divine sense was about to envelop Vice Command Master Dan, Vice Command Master Dan seemed to sense it. He suddenly raised his head and looked around in the air. Zhang Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. She hurriedly withdrew her divine sense and thought to herself, could it be that this person can sense divine sense? When Zhang Xiaohua withdrew her divine sense, Vice Command Master Dan also seemed to sense something. He frowned slightly and continued to look around in confusion. After a while, he didn't discover anything. He asked, Gao Xionglin, when you came here, was there anyone following you? When Banner Master Gao heard this, he immediately replied respectfully, I was cautious. Vice Command Master Dan should know that I took many detours to get here. I didn't even notice anyone following me. Even if there was someone following me, I would have shaken him off long ago. Vice Command Master Dan replied. However, he still wasn't completely at ease. He activated his inner energy and magnified his senses to check carefully. He then said, perhaps I was overthinking. Oh, right. You said that Pingyang City isn't very peaceful. What is it? Tell me about it. Banner Master Gao smiled and said, Vice Command Master Dan, please take a seat inside. I will pass the girl in the carriage to you and tell you about it in detail. How about that? All right, Gao Xionglin, you just like to scheme. Vice Command Master Dan smiled and said, Aren't you just afraid that I won't reward you? Come, come. Put the girl in the back hall and tell me in detail about the strange incident. Then I will give you the reward that Vice Command Master Dan promised. Really? Banner Master Gao was overjoyed. Thank you, Vice Command Master Dan. After he finished speaking, he turned around and carried the little girl out of the carriage and followed Vice Command Master Dan into the main hall. Zhang Xiaohua thought that her supernatural awareness had been seen through and did not dare to release it again. After thinking for a moment, she didn't dare to stay any longer. She jumped down from the ground and used the earth escape technique to reach Yudei's hiding place. She found a place where she could hide from him and walk to Yudei. Brother E. Yudei hurriedly asked, Hero, did you manage to find out what happened in front? Zhang Xiaohua told Yudei about what she saw in the manor just now. Finally, she said, there are indeed a few experts in the manor. I reckon that the two of us might not be their match. Can you see if you can find some helpers? Helpers. Yudei was puzzled. Where did the helpers that you sent go? Him. Zhang Xiaohua said he left earlier. I don't know where he is now. Then where do you want me to find helpers? Yudei asked. Sai, how would I know? Now that I think about it, it might not be a bad thing to lure your brother-in-law here. Hero, it's useless to regret now. However, I have an idea. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up. What is it? Tell me about it. I have a command arrow for the deployment of soldiers from Pingyang City. I received it when I went to the village to exterminate the bandits. With this command arrow, I can deploy some soldiers to the towns and cities around Pingyang City that are guarded by soldiers. However, I don't know where we are and which town is the closest to here. It's impossible to go back to Pingyang City now. Zhang Xiaohua laughed in her heart. If it's Pingyang City, I won't know. However, this journey seems to be in the same direction as my journey from Lu Town to Pingyang City. I've just passed by here. How can I forget? Then, Zhang Xiaohua pretended to be deep in thought. After a while, she said, From what I remember, there seems to be a town called Lu Town in the southwest from here. It should be half a day's journey. With Brother Yi's speed, you should be able to reach it in the middle of the night? Of course. With my speed, with my mount's speed, there shouldn't be a problem. Good. Brother E, I'll leave the task of returning to Lu Town to mobilize the soldiers to you. I'll stay here to keep an eye on them. If they do anything strange, send your niece to another place. I'll leave a message here. What do you think? Yudei cursed in his heart. Look at the situation now. All right, you still have to mobilize the soldiers. If you didn't let me do it earlier and saved her, we would have returned to Pingyang City long ago. But now, the one with the bigger fist was right. He didn't dare to raise any objections. He cupped his hands and said, Then I'll have to trouble you. I'll go and mobilize the soldiers now. I think I'll be able to return by tomorrow morning. During this time, please keep an eye on these bandits. Don't let my niece go missing. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Don't worry, don't worry. If anything happens, even if I don't save my own people, I'll save your niece first. How about that? Yudei didn't care whether he believed it or not. He still cupped his hands and said, Thank you, hero. I'll go now. After he finished speaking, he mounted his horse and lashed out with his horsewhip. The purplish-red horse's hooves flew as it galloped along the small path. When Yudei was far away, Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged and pondered carefully. Ever since she cultivated her divine perception, no one had ever found out about it. How did it get discovered today? Could it be that martial artists who cultivated to an extremely high level would also have divine perception? However, That day under the lava on the deserted island, when her divine perception came into contact with the monster with huge eyes, it was different from what she felt from the bronze-masked man today. Perhaps this bronze-masked man didn't have divine perception, but could he feel that she was using her divine perception to observe? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. If that was the case, she couldn't use her divine perception. What should she do? -3. Chapter 402. Zhang Xiaohua's guess was right. Martial arts were modified from the way of the immortals. Many skills and supernatural powers were based on the way of the immortals. Divine sense was a supernatural power unique to the way of the immortals. Martial artists were unable to absorb qi into their bodies and could only use the yuan qi of the heavens and earth to acquire divine sense. However, they knew the wonders of divine sense. In the past 10,000 years, many talented martial artists had cultivated their internal energy to the peak according to the records in the ancient books. They were able to sense everything within a few feet of them. Although the deputy commander of the manor wore a bronze mask and did not want anyone to know his true face, he was still a famous figure in the Jianghu. Of course, even if he did not wear the mask, Zhang Xiaohua would not recognize him. This person's internal energy had also been cultivated to a certain level. That was why he could sense the abnormalities around him. Of course, this was only a slight flutter in his heart. If it was really as Zhang Xiaohua thought and he could sense someone using divine sense to spy on him, this deputy commander would still need to cultivate for more than 10 years. However, his abnormal behavior put Zhang Xiaohua in a difficult position. His original plan was to use his divine sense to find the girls who were imprisoned in the manor. Then he would wait for an opportunity to rescue them. If Little Orange was in the manor, that would be great. If not, he would have to find someone alive and interrogate them properly. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua raised his head to look at the manor that could be vaguely seen on the other side of the pine forest. His heart was filled with excitement. This old man with the bronze mask is obviously the leader of the manor. Since he can sense my divine sense, he should be a master of martial arts. Ever since I returned from the deserted island, none of the opponents I encountered were able to withstand a single blow from him. I don't know how good my martial arts are. If I can exchange a few blows with this person, it will be a test for me. Since ancient times, there have been many heroes in the Jianghu. Who would have thought that a country boy like me would have the qualifications to compete with a master of the Jianghu? Life is so fast. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua almost had the urge to charge into the manor and challenge the old man with the bronze mask. However, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but laugh. It seemed that her temperament was still not tempered enough. The most important thing now was to find Little Orange, rescue the girls in the manor, and compete with the bronze-masked old man in martial arts. Which time was not good. Zhang Xiaohua patted the head of the David's deer and took the long sword from Huan's back. But after thinking for a while, she put it back. She only had 2 weapons now. One was a long sword and the other was a small sword. The small sword could be kept in her bosom, but the long sword could not be. But in the future, when she roamed the Jianghu, she would definitely see a weapon. The small sword could be activated, which was a cultivation method of immortality. It was her secret and could not be revealed. Otherwise, she would immediately become the target of the entire Jianghu. So the long sword was her only choice. In today's trip to the manor, there were many opponents, and she was alone. However, she knew that there were tigers in the mountain, but she still went to the mountain. If she only relied on her long sword, she might not be able to succeed. She would have to rely on the cultivation method of immortality, or even the escape method to be effective. Instead of that, she might as well use the small sword directly. Zhang Xiaohua put the long sword away and tidied the handkerchief on her face. She thought to herself, that guy's bronze mask is not bad. I should take the time to take it. How cool it is to wear it. She took a deep breath as if to encourage herself. Her body flew diagonally and went straight to the pine forest beside her. When Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the tree where she was hiding, she thought for a moment and jumped down from the tree. She made a hand seal and her body entered the ground, heading towards the manor. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua's head popped out from the side of a small house. Just as her body appeared, she heard a series of goo-goo sounds. Then there was a series of ling-ling-ling-ling sounds. A flock of gray pigeons flew out from the house beside Zhang Xiaohua's. This gave Zhang Xiaohua fright. Before she could steady herself, she immediately made another hand seal and escaped to another place. When they were far enough away from the room, they saw two men dressed in martial arts attire running out of a house. They looked at the pigeons circling above the house and then carefully looked around. One of the men shouted, "Old Seven, did you see anything?" Old Seven also replied, "No, there's nothing. There's not even a footprint. This is strange. Why did the pigeons fly out of nowhere? Oh, maybe it's a mouse in the house. Didn't Grandpa Sue's cat scare this flock of pigeons last year? Maybe. In any case, it's fine as long as there's no one. No one. If there was someone, the brothers in the front yard would have discovered him long ago. Why would they let him run here? Brother Zhang, if you said this before the new year, you wouldn't be wrong. But now, all the brothers are out looking for people for the commander. Where is the previous strict security?" Brother Zhang smiled and said, "Let's go. We're just pawns. We don't even have the task of looking for people. I really don't understand why our commander needs so many girls. Even if he's a groom every night, he doesn't need to be in such a hurry to get 77 girls, right?" Then he hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "Moreover, many of the girls he got are only a few years old. Why do you think our commander has this kind of hobby? Although I've never seen the commander's real face, looking at his figure and hair from afar, he doesn't seem to be young. His body, will he be able to withstand it?" When Old Seventh heard this, he also looked around and said mysteriously, "I reckon you won't know the reason even if you crack your head open." Old Seventh, from the looks of it you seem to know something. I didn't say anything about that. I know, Brother Zhang. Don't talk nonsense. Old Seventh, do you think I don't know your temper? We've been brothers for more than 10 years. We've been through thick and thin together from the time we helped the commander. What's so hard to say? Why don't I set up a table tonight to warm you up? Tsk. Speaking of this, Brother Zhang is being an outsider. Yes, I won't hide it from Brother Zhang. A few banner masters were drinking together before the new year, and I was fortunate enough to serve them. I overheard some of it, but I've never told anyone. I'm telling Brother Zhang today because we've been brothers for so many years. You absolutely must keep this a secret for me." When Brother Zhang heard this, his eyes lit up. He patted his chest and said, "Who's your Brother Zhang?" "Zhang Ilang, who's known to be tight-lipped. How could he have leaked it?" "Hey, Old Seventh, tell me about it." "Actually, Brother Zhang, it's nothing special. I just overheard it. It's said that the commander recently obtained a method to cultivate internal energy. He uses 77 girls who are born on the 7th day of the 7th month to harvest their primordial yin. He can cultivate a type of peerless internal energy that's rarely seen in the world. These little girls also need to have their primordial yin harvested? When he said this, Brother Zhang was at a loss for words. When Old Seventh heard this, he quickly went forward and covered Brother Zhang's mouth. He said reproachfully, "Brother Zhang, look at you. Didn't you say not to make a fuss over nothing? What does the age of these little girls have to do with us? They're not our relatives, and we didn't kidnap them. We're just running errands. Even if the heavens punish us, the taller ones will bear the brunt of it." Brother Zhang reached out and pulled Old Seventh's hand away. He said, "But I'm just curious. How did the commander harvest the primordial yin of these little girls?" Seeing that the brothers have all gone out to look for them, the commander must be very anxious. He'll probably be here soon. When he's done, there will definitely be some news. Let's just listen carefully. Zhang Xiaohua was annoyed and glad at the same time. She was annoyed because the commander was obviously a beast. He didn't even let go of little girls. She was glad because Little Orange was among these girls. She was sure that she hadn't been harmed yet. She wasn't too late. However, this manor was so big that she didn't dare to use her divine sense to look around. It was difficult to find where Little Orange was. She only hoped that these two people would say a few more words and tell her about Little Orange and the others. Unfortunately, these two people chatted for a while and stopped talking about this. Zhang Xiaohua was very anxious. She was about to jump out and capture them for questioning when she heard a voice shouting from afar, "Zhang Qing, Bai Qi, what are you doing? Come back quickly." Brother Zhang hurriedly raised his voice and replied, "Manager, please wait a moment. This kid is here." There was some movement from the pigeons just now. After saying that, the two people didn't dare to delay and hurriedly left. Zhang Xiaohua was left behind with a gloomy face, looking at the small houses that looked very similar. Zhang Xiaohua knew that Little Orange and the others were definitely not here. But where could they be? Could it be that they're in the hall where the old man with the bronze mask came out? And, seeing how Banner Commander Gao was so respectful to that person, he must be the commander that Brother Zhang and Brother Zhang are talking about. Zhang Xiaohua thought as she burrowed into the ground and moved towards the hall. Since that old man could sense Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense, he might also be able to sense Zhang Xiaohua's earth escape. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. After walking for a while, the sky started to darken. Some of the small houses were lit up. Seeing the scene, Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. There were very few lit houses, which meant that there weren't many people in the manor. At this time it was alternating between black and white, and her vision was the most blurred. Wasn't this the best time for Zhang Xiaohua to make a move? Zhang Xiaohua flashed out. She didn't go towards the hall. Instead, with the hall as the center, she walked around the manor. She confirmed that other than the slightly bigger house in the hall, the other houses were all small. Little Orange and the others couldn't be outside. Only then did she walk to the vicinity of the hall. To be honest, Zhang Xiaohua's usual method was to use her divine sense to open the way. It was always successful. Now that she used her divine sense, she felt that her hands and feet were tied. She was extremely uncomfortable. Looking at the hall, which was slightly bigger than the small houses next to it, Zhang Xiaohua frowned. There were 77 people, and they weren't standing upright in the house. The hall didn't seem to be able to fit them all. At this time, there was a faint light coming from the hall. Zhang Xiaohua made up her mind and flew over, landing on the roof of the hall. "Please vote for me. Thank you." -3. Chapter 403. Zhang Xiaohua went up to the roof and bent down. He put his ear to the roof and listened carefully. He heard a respectful voice in the hall say, "But Commander, I am very grateful that you think so highly of this lowly one and allowed this lowly one to see such a secret." Another slightly older voice sounded, "Bannerman Gao, you've done a great service by being able to gather enough girls within the stipulated time limit. Not to mention that you should be rewarded. This mission alone is a test for the Bannermen. We all have important matters to attend to, so we can't stay here for long. This manor is the foundation of our Roaring Sky Order. If there's no one who's skilled enough to manage it, we won't be at ease." Banner Leader Gao's voice trembled as he said, "Could it be? Commander, this lowly one's ability is shallow. I'm afraid that I won't be able to live up to your expectations." The commander said, "It's fine." Banner Leader Gao, "Oh, I should call you Steward Gao in advance. What we mean is that we should set up a stewards group above the steward and select a few stewards to take charge of the affairs within the command. What do you think?" Banner Leader Gao was a little disappointed, but also a little excited. He said that's how it should be. "But Commander, thank you for your promotion and care." Then one of them complimented the other, and the other enjoyed the compliment. They actually talked a lot of nonsense. Seeing that the sky was already dark, Zhang Xiaohua felt very helpless. She was about to go down the roof and find a person or two to capture and ask about the details when she heard Banner Leader Gao say, "Commander is indeed talented and bold." If it wasn't for Commander, this lowly one wouldn't have dreamed that there would be such a spacious underground hall under this hall that's only a few feet wide. When the commander heard this, he laughed softly and said, "Steward Gao, you praise us too much. The underground hall wasn't our work. It already existed long before we took over this manor." Manager Gao seemed a little awkward, forcing out a smile. "That is also because of your good fortune. Otherwise, such a good thing wouldn't have been sent to you." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself, these two people have spoken so much nonsense. This young master has drunk so much cold wind on this roof. Only this sentence is the most effective. But is the entrance to the underground hall inside the hall? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but laugh in her heart. Do I still need to find the entrance now? Then, Zhang Xiaohua flipped over and landed lightly. She was like the wind and did not attract the attention of the commander in the hall. Before her body landed, Zhang Xiaohua had already formed a seal. When her body landed on the ground, she immediately burrowed into the soil. At this moment, a man holding a tray in his hand was wiping his eyes vigorously. He asked the person beside him, "Brother, did you see a figure land on top of the hall just now? Why did it disappear as soon as it landed?" The person beside him laughed and said, "Seventh brother, could it be that you have gone crazy from holding it in these few days? Who can disappear after landing on the ground? Even if one's lightness skills are superb, there should still be a figure left behind." "It's true. I really saw it just now. It must be right." "Forget it, seventh brother. The sky is so dark. How could you see it? It must be an illusion." "No, I just saw it with the help of the light in the hall. How could it be an illusion?" "Then, seventh brother, why don't you go to the hall now and report to the vice commander? What do you think?" "This forget it. Maybe I really saw wrongly." The few of them walked away while the seventh brother looked back from time to time. He really didn't believe that his eyes were playing tricks on him. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that she had been seen by others. She was using the earth escape technique and delightedly went down. Sure enough, after a while her eyes lit up. Under the hall, there was actually a spacious space that was several times bigger than the hall above ground. And in this space, there were actually countless jade coffins. Why are there so many coffins here? And they are even coffins made of jade. Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. These jade coffins were arranged in a very strange way. They were scattered on the ground, and in the center, there was a dark green grass praying mat. Looking at the position of these coffins around the praying mat in the center, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. This seemed to be a kind of array. If each coffin was replaced with a talisman, then it would be an extremely strange array. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to use her divine sense. She could only roughly see with her eyes. After counting carefully, there were actually a total of 77 jade coffins. Most of the coffins had their lids open. Only the coffins near the center were tightly closed. Zhang Xiaohua touched her chin with her hand and pondered. Could it be that these coffins are used to store girls? Could it be that the commander used this array to collect girls' primordial yin? That's not very possible. In Elder was jade bamboo slips. There was no mention of an array that could collect girls' primordial yin. However, at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to pursue the matter further. The most important thing was to see if Little Orange was here. Indeed, starting from the periphery, there was a girl lying in each coffin with its lids open. They were dressed differently, but they were all below the age of 20. There were even a few children who looked like they were only a few years old. The little girl that Zhang Xiaohua saved in Lu Town was also among them. When Zhang Xiaohua walked to the center, indeed, she saw Little Orange lying quietly in one of the coffins. Her face was a little pale, but her expression was serene. Her breathing was long and deep, as if she was in a deep sleep. Zhang Xiaohua stood in front of Little Orange's coffin. Her hanging heart finally settled down. As long as she could find Little Orange, and it seemed that she wasn't in any danger, then she could answer to Nie Qinyu, who was waiting bitterly in Pingyang City. But what was Little Orange's situation now? Zhang Xiaohua had no idea in her heart. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua carefully looked at the jade coffin that contained little orange. The jade coffin seemed to be of good quality. There was a dark green color in the pure white jade, and on the surface of the jade there were many mysterious patterns. Looking at the lid at the side, there were also complicated patterns. Zhang Xiaohua understood in her heart that this coffin was really a huge talisman. What she usually used and made were just small jade slips, but this array was so powerful that it used such a huge jade coffin. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's mind lit up. She suddenly understood that this array was not an array to remove a person's vital yin. In Venerable Fire Dragon's jade slip, it mentioned a more evil array. It was an array that used a person's vital essence or life as the foundation of the talisman. The purpose of this array was not to attack or defend, but to use heaven-defying methods to achieve extraordinary benefits for the caster, such as increasing one's lifespan or raising one's cultivation level, etc. It seemed that the token master above her should also know some immortal Tao arrays. That was why he found 77 girls on the 7th of July and used the lives of these 77 innocent girls to achieve his heaven-defying goal. Instantly, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes flashed with a sharp light. She already had a plan in her heart. What is chivalrous? Seeing injustice. Drawing one's sword to help is chivalrous. Since I saw such a thing today, how can I let it go? Only saving little orange is a kind of righteousness. Only by killing the token master, saving these girls, and cutting off the source of this array is chivalrous. Moreover, I don't have many jade slips with me. The last time I made jade talismans for mother, father, and the rest, I have already used them all. Now that there are good jade materials, if I don't take them, wouldn't I be a sucker? It's better to let someone else take the lead. However, Zhang Xiaohua was in a bit of a difficult situation. These 77 jade coffins were spread throughout the entire hall, far from being able to fit in the space in his money pouch. Furthermore, weren't there girls in the coffins? He couldn't just casually put the girls on the ground, right? Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and came up with an idea. We can't take the coffins, but we can take the coffin lids. There's a lot of space in my money bag, and the coffin lids don't take up much space. It is a good item to take. Moreover, if I use my divine sense slightly, it should not be noticed by the bronze masked token master above. After thinking, Zhang Xiaohua took out his money bag and took the coffin lid next to Little Orange. Then, Zhang Xiaohua did not stand on ceremony and walked all the way to the green grass praying mat in the middle. He had already put the 77 jade coffin lids into his money bag. Zhang Xiaohua used his divine sense to feel the neatly stacked jade lids in the space of his money bag. Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. This trip was not in vain. Looking at the green grass praying mat in front of him, Zhang Xiaohua inadvertently used his divine sense to scan it. He could not help but exclaim softly, "What is this thing?" There is actually a slight fluctuation of vital energy coming from the grass praying mat. Is this a grass praying mat woven with herbs? No matter what it is, as long as it is something good, I will not let it go. Thinking, Zhang Xiaohua put the grass praying mat into his money bag. Sigh, he would rather take the wrong thing than let it go. This was Zhang Xiaohua's usual style. Looking at the empty space in his money bag, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but have an idea. The array in this hall was obviously an evil existence. How could he let it continue to exist in this world? If he took away the coffin lids, he did not know if he could destroy it. If he could still make it work, then wouldn't it be a waste of his efforts? However, if he was asked to smash these jade lids, he could not bear to do it. Why not take away the other empty coffins? When he had a use for them in the future, he could cut them into jade pieces. Wouldn't that be perfect? Killing two birds with one stone. With a perfect reason, Zhang Xiaohua then put the last 10 jade coffins into the money bag, filling up the space. Finally, Zhang Xiaohua clapped his hands and walked in front of Little Orange, reaching out to pull him out. At this time a scream sounded. "You? Who are you?" "Please add, please tip, thank you." -3. Chapter 404. Zhang Xiaohua looked back and saw the bronze-masked old man walking down a flight of stairs at the side of the hall. Oh no, how did he find out? Zhang Xiaohua exclaimed in her heart. The bronze-masked old man asked sternly, "Who are you? How did you break into my sect's restricted area?" Then he looked at the missing coffins in the array and was even more shocked. He exerted force on his feet and flew to the front of the array. He shouted, "Where are the coffins? Did you do something to them? Where did you take them?" Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She smiled apologetically and said, "Brother, you misunderstood me. I just came down and walked to the front of the coffins. I didn't understand anything, and you appeared. What coffins are you asking about?" "I don't know." The bronze-masked old man said, "Oh, then I've wronged you. But how did you get in?" "There's only one entrance to this hall, and it's right below my seat. I've been sitting there the whole night. How did you get in?" Hearing the old man's question, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She released her divine sense and scanned the entire hall. At the same time, she looked at the old man. However, the old man didn't seem to feel anything. Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. She immediately scanned the old man with her divine sense. Sure enough, the old man seemed to feel something again. He raised his head and looked around. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood and immediately withdrew her divine sense from the old man. It turned out that the old man wasn't able to sense divine sense. When the divine sense really scanned his body, he would feel it. If the divine sense circled around him, he wouldn't be able to feel it. After the old man looked around, he didn't find anything. He stared at Zhang Xiaohua again. Zhang Xiaohua pointed to a corner and said with a smile, "I saw a light here just now. It came in from that ventilated place." Oh, the old man looked at the corner thoughtfully. Subsequently, the old man said as he walked, "Young man, although you're masked, I can tell from your voice that you're young. I'm also a person who cherishes talents. Since you're able to sneak in here safely, you must have your own unique skills. My sect is now recruiting talents. If you can make a vow to not reveal the secret of this place and join my sect, I don't mind taking you as a disciple and teaching you everything I know. Moreover, I also have an important position in my sect. Your future will be 100 times better than what you have now, won't it?" As he spoke, he was already within 10 paces of Zhang Xiaohua. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't seem to be aware of it. She continued to let him walk forward, as if she was still thinking. Seeing this, the old man laughed in his heart. He didn't stop and continued to say, "You can see that my sect has a deep foundation. Although we do some shady business, we treat these goods very well. They even sleep on jade beds. If you agree to this old man's request, you can choose a few of these goods to be your concubines. What do you think?" As he spoke, he got a lot closer. He was almost 10 paces away from her. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "It's not difficult to agree to your request, but how can I trust you? I still don't know what sect you belong to. Who are you? Why don't you take off the bronze mask first, and let this one take a look first?" The old man smiled and said, "You little brat are quite naughty. Good. Since this old man has the intention to take you as a disciple, I'm not afraid that you'll see this old man's true face." After he finished speaking, he stood still. He didn't open his left hand, but his right hand was about to take off the mask. However, just as his right hand touched the mask, his wrist flipped, and in coordination with his left hand, he slapped towards Zhang Xiaohua's chest. However, Zhang Xiaohua acted as if she already knew this was going to happen. She didn't wait for the palm wind to reach her body. She immediately floated up and stood beside a coffin. She smiled and said, "Old man, why are you so impatient? Why don't you wait for this one to explain clearly?" When the old man saw that she had turned hostile, he didn't give her any face. He said sternly, "What's there to explain? The coffins in this hall are connected to this old man's mind. If anyone moves, this old man will be able to sense it. This old man has been sitting on top of it for an entire night and there was no movement. How can this old man sense it when you just came in? Don't tell me this isn't your trick." Who else could it be? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly realized that there must be something in this array that was connected to this old man. When she moved the lid of the coffin, it didn't affect the array. Therefore, the old man didn't sense anything. She could only blame herself for being greedy and wanting to take more, which attracted the old man's attention. However, since she was going to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens, she definitely had to go against this old man. Moreover, fortunately, this old man didn't seem to know her intentions. He thought that she was greedy and didn't use Little Orange to threaten her. If he really used Little Orange to threaten her, it would be difficult for her. Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Since you know my intentions, I won't say anything more. If you let me out, I swear that I won't reveal the secret of this place. Otherwise, hee." Zhang Xiaohua's eyes looked at the jade coffin under her feet with a sinister smile. "You." Seeing this, the old man couldn't help but be enraged. He said, "You brat, if you dare to damage this array, I'll pull out your tendons and skin you alive." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she deliberately asked, "Array? What's an array?" "This." The old man seemed to have just realized that he had revealed something. He only snorted and said, "This day next year will be your death anniversary. What's the use of knowing so much?" Zhang Xiaohua's face was suddenly enlightened. She said, "I see. If I damage this stupid array, you'll pull out my tendons and skin me alive. If I'm honest, this day next year will be my death anniversary. Why don't you tell me why I didn't touch this coffin?" The old man was speechless. Yes, wasn't this the reason? Seeing that the old man was deflated, Zhang Xiaohua was very excited. She exerted force in her leg and was about to kick the coffin at the side. The old man was shocked and immediately jumped up. His right hand was like a knife. The leg that was kicked out toward Zhang Xiaohua was also like a sharp sword, chopping toward Zhang Xiaohua. There was a girl sleeping in the coffin, so Zhang Xiaohua naturally wouldn't really kick it. Seeing the old man's right hand chopping towards her, she laughed out loud. She flipped over to the top of the old man and clenched her left hand into a fist. Like a bolt of lightning, she punched towards the old man's face. When the old man saw this, he knew that he had fallen for Zhang Xiaohua's little trick. He didn't care and raised his left hand, using the power of fire to burn the sky to block it. Zhang Xiaohua laughed in her heart. Even if this simple block was filled with inner force, how could it be a match for her strength of 10,000 jin? Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua had never had the awareness of an expert. She had always pretended to be a pig to eat the tiger. However, Zhang Xiaohua's concealment was useful to deal with ordinary experts. But who was her opponent now? Although he didn't know, the other party was one of the famous experts in Jianghu. His experience was not ordinary. Although he didn't have the divine sense like Zhang Xiaohua, but with his inner force, he was able to see and hear clearly. Before Zhang Xiaohua's fist hit, the strength in the fist had already caused the surrounding air to change. The wind from the fist was biting cold and was very different from the usual. That old man's expression changed slightly. He immediately put away his contempt and raised the inner force in his palm from 30% to 70%. In an instant, his palm and fist collided. A muffled pung sound was heard, and a light breeze was set off around the two of them. The two of them felt an extremely abundant and unmatched strength coming from their arms. They saw the old man's body bend backwards and retreated 10 steps. His feet actually left a footprint on the ground before he stopped. Zhang Xiaohua was the same. Her body flipped in the air for 10 over somersaults before she was able to dissipate the strength. The two of them stood on the ground with a grave expression. It was really out of their expectations. Zhang Xiaohua knew that this old man's martial arts were extremely high and was a formidable opponent. But she didn't expect that the old man's hasty response would cause her to suffer so much. Then what was his true strength? Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to reevaluate the old man's martial arts. The old man was also surprised. He didn't underestimate Zhang Xiaohua from the beginning. Before the fist and palm collided, he thought highly of her after hearing the wind from the fist. But after seeing the strength of Zhang Xiaohua's fist, he thought highly of her even more. He placed Zhang Xiaohua at the same level as himself. This was the difference in experience. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know the old man's martial arts background and didn't know how many levels of inner force he had raised at the last moment. Therefore, she overestimated the old man's strength. On the other hand, the old man estimated Zhang Xiaohua's strength to be infinitely close to the truth. Of course, this was only close to the level of martial arts. Although Zhang Xiaohua estimated that her martial arts couldn't beat the old man, the situation in front of her didn't allow Zhang Xiaohua to retreat. Not to mention that the old man wouldn't let him go. Even if the old man wanted to let him go, he might not be willing to leave. A chivalrous heart was sometimes that simple. The two of them looked at each other with a grave expression. Then they shouted loudly and attacked, almost at the same time. They fought barehanded. Although the old man was old, the wind from his fist was biting cold. His inner force was incomparably abundant. It was actually not any less than Zhang Xiaohua's divine bravery. The two of them fought for dozens of rounds. The old man suddenly laughed and said, "I thought you were Xiaoxia from some sect. So you're a disciple of the Misty School. This is strange. The Misty School has been destroyed for so many years. How are you still free and unfettered? Moreover, how come I've never heard of someone like you in the Misty School?" Zhang Xiaohua laughed loudly and said, "Don't ask where a hero comes from. Miracles come from people. Why do you care which sect I'm from? Your fist technique is something this old man has never seen before. But if your Qigong isn't the ethereal steps of the Misty School, then what is it? Only, my sect has nothing to do with the Misty School. Why did you come to my sect to behave so atrociously? Ha ha ha! If you don't do anything wrong, you don't have to be afraid of ghosts knocking on your door. If you didn't do anything outrageous, why would you be afraid of me coming to your door?" The old man laughed and said, "That's good. I don't care where you're from. Leave your life first." After he finished speaking, he pulled out a short sword from his waist and stabbed it towards Zhang Xiaohua's head. Zhang Xiaohua also laughed and said, "Only you have a sword. Watch me." After she finished speaking, she also pulled out a short sword that was a bit shorter than her opponent's. She took a step forward and faced the attack. It's been hard for everyone to listen to my story slowly. I wanted to come up with some interesting plot, but no matter how I look at it, it's similar to the plot of those little hooligans in the city. Who would be so stupid as to come up with it? It's not interesting. In fact, Xiaohua's combat strength was already very high. As far as the current situation was concerned, it was definitely enough. Moreover, wasn't it very unrealistic to get injured in a fight? And once injured, one's strength would increase explosively? The golden finger couldn't be activated any faster. The heavenly axiom and the innate divine restriction had already revealed some clues. The path of cultivation was diverse and varied. Even if it was plain, it would still feel like the third place. Thank you again, Longzi and everyone's opinions. The essence is everyone's. The reward points will be given to everyone every month. I never use it for myself. Oh, right. I also have to thank everyone for their recommendation votes. Please vote more in the future. -3.